in front of me now.
I find that astonishing, actually, because this is, become one of the most criticised elements of the show, one of the most controversial, one of the things that causes the most amount of stress. It's presented as fact. It is disputed how good the technology is, but you don't know yourself what the range is in terms of the likeliness to get a true and accurate reading out of the test.
I think we knew it wasn't 100%. We put on screen to the viewers, we would tell the contributors that the lie detector is designed to indicate whether somebody is being deceptive. Practitioners claim it to have a high level of accuracy, although this is disputed.
Yeah, but you can't define what high level of accuracy is.
I am
other than being not 100%, but 50% is not 100%.
I am not a lie detector expert, so what we would do is...
No, but you are responsible for this programme. You are the person who's responsible for this programme. This is a key feature in this programme. And I think if you were using that and if you were being responsible, you would know the answer to that question.
Like I said, I'm not a lie detector expert, so we would hire in a lie detector expert. They would do the tests, they would come up with the results, and then the results would be given to the producers, which would then be given to Jeremy. We wouldn't get involved with the actual lie detector test.
Okay, well, you commissioned this. I think if you don't know the answer to that question, you can't say what the range is of the likely accuracy of those tests. I think that is irresponsible.
I think it's disputed, so it's very difficult to come up with that figure.
I understand it might be disputed, but I've asked you what the range was, not necessarily to pin yourself on a particular number, but to give an idea of the range. I'm disappointed that you can't do that. Where are the tests done?
So they would be done in rooms in Media City, and like I say, it would be done away from the production by an expert.
And when would they, in terms of what's the time difference between the test being done and the results being given to the person who's done the test as they were done in that clip?
So normally the test would be done probably the day before. Sometimes it would be done the day of record.
Okay. So
would it be useful if I explained the production process of how the show was recorded on a...
Well, we're sure we'll come on to that as we go through, but at the moment I just want to focus on this bit. We've got a range of topics we want to discuss.
Yeah.
So, it's not secret information. You read up on the way polygraph tests are done. Obviously, a machine can't tell whether someone's lying. It's reading bodily functions. It's reading heart rate. It's reading perspiration rates. So, how likely do you think that test is going to be accurate when this has not been done in a controlled environment, but someone who's away from their home, staying in a hotel at Media City, maybe on the day they're going to make a television programme where they're probably quite nervous and quite anxious about that? How likely is it, do you think, that they're going to give a calm, measured reading in that test?
I think, we got experts to take the test, and I think that the contributors were fully informed beforehand of what the test involved, and they would have asked us to appear on the show and to take a lie detector test.
They may have been informed. They were told by you that this is an expert who can do the test, and it's not 100% accurate, but experts say it's accurate. They don't know how accurate it is. They're not doing it in controlled conditions. They're doing it in a makeshift facility on the day potentially they're going on a television programme when they might be feeling quite anxious. And the people who are doing the test, are they people that just work for the company that own the equipment?
Yeah, we employed professionals to take the test.
And so obviously they work for a company. I know it's a company that I think it's called UK Lie Detectors or something like that. Company.
Yeah.
They're based in Manchester as well, aren't they? I think.
I think their offices potentially might be in Norwich actually.
Oh, okay.
But I'd need to check that.
Okay, but the test's not being done in like a controlled medical facility or research laboratory, or it's being done at Media City. And the people doing it, they have medical qualifications. They're doing the testing.
I don't think they've got medical qualifications, but they've got qualifications in lie detector.
Is there a body? Is there an organisation that issues qualifications in being a lie detector tester?
That was there are, and I can get those details and give them to you.
But those are likely to be the qualifications, if they have any at all, that these people have.
Yeah, and the people that we used, had been doing this for many, many years, and were, obviously very competent.
It seems a very precarious environment for people who are potentially going through what could be a life-changing moment, and I'm not sure that the show is preparing people for what this means, or indeed even briefing them properly as to how potentially likely this test is to be very flawed. It's not been done in a controlled way, not by people with medical qualifications, not been done in a specialist facility, and people aren't being told what the range of percentage is in terms of how likely this is to be true or not. And that seems to be quite a precarious position to put people in. Mr. Stanier, from your position as Director of Aftercare, I mean, for people that you've met who've been on the show, who've had concerns or anxiety after the show, how much has that been linked to people that have been through lie detector tests who may have been adversely affected by that?
We explain it differently. What we would say is that prior to the show is that some people will fail this test, but yet they will be telling the truth. So we explain it differently. We don't use percentages. We just make it very, very clear that some people will fail that test, but yet they'll be telling the truth. So I think that's a fairer way to explain it.
Well, I don't think it's very fair, because I don't think people have been given the full picture of what these tests are, how inaccurate they could be. They're not being told that information. But the question I asked you was about, in terms of aftercare, after show, do you think actually the polygraph test is a contributing factor to people that suffer with, concerns, depression after they've been on the show?
I think yes. When somebody says
yes, it is. You think it is?
They do become distressed because they disagree with the result, and therefore that's why we have a guest welfare service after show in order to alleviate that distress. And what we want is for people to be comforted, controlled, calm after that result.
Yeah. So when in that aftercare process, do you say to them, look, don't worry, the test is probably only 2/3 of the time accurate, so chances are it might not be true. Do you say that to them?
We do, because we've actually mentioned it prior to the show. Yeah. So we will reiterate that point, that we'll go back to the point that we raised before the show, which is that some people will fail this test, yet they will be telling the truth.
Yeah, but if they've also been told before the show it's not 100% accurate, but being led to believe it is highly accurate, the aftercare, if you've got someone who's distressed, or you've got a couple, maybe very distressed, maybe about to make a life-changing decision based on the results of this test,
yes.
Do you sit them down and say, look, actually the accuracy of this is greatly disputed, it might be 1/3 of the time it's not accurate at best, and therefore you shouldn't rely on this test? Do you sit people down and have those sorts of conversations as specifically as that?
Again, I won't refer to specific numbers because I'm naive about the figures of accuracy.
But are you aware of figures, though, of accuracy?
I've always been aware that the lie detector was not 100%
yeah,
accurate.
I know that, but you said I'm aware of the figures, so you're aware of a range?
No, I'm not.
I'm not. So you're the Director of Aftercare on this programme, and you don't have any figures for the percentage of accuracy of this test?
I would prefer to say to them that some people will fail this test, yet they will be telling the truth before they do the test, and then after the test I will raise that again.
But doesn't that mean it's meaningless, isn't it? I mean, it's a meaningless piece of information to give to people.
From my point of view, it's about keeping them informed.
But they're not. You're not, are you? Because you're not giving them information that could be relevant, would help them to put the test into context.
I'm informing them that some people can fail the test, but yet be telling the truth. And then I can raise that, if people are upset after the show, I can raise that again and say, this is what we spoke about.
Yeah, but in the context of before the show, people are being told it's not 100% accurate, but the people who do the test believe it is highly accurate, so they believe it is highly accurate, and it's being presented on the show as definitive by Jeremy Carr. There's no ambiguity in what he's saying there. And then afterwards, you're not saying to people, well, okay, there is a range of scores here. The test isn't, you shouldn't rely on it. You don't even know what the range of accuracy is yourself. You've just said that.
I prefer to say to them that some people will fail the test.
Joe Stevens.
Can I go back to you, Mr. McLennan? You said that there are different views from different experts about the reliability of the lie detector test. Can I just clarify, have you actually got information about that? Have you commissioned it? Did you look at it? Or are you talking about doing that in the future when you gave your answers previously?
Like I said, what we know is that the test is...
No, can you answer the question, please? Have you, as a programme, as the executive producer, actually sought out those different views that you discussed of experts about the reliability of the test, or is that something that you intend to do in the future? I want to know whether you've already got the information and you've looked at it, or whether you haven't got the information at all.
So I've been around lie detectors in my professional career for the last 15 to 20 years. So I know that there is different opinion.
So I'll ask you the same question that the chair asked Mr.
So this
Stanier.
is why I was very...
What's the range?
Yeah. Well, this is why we wanted to make it clear to the contributors and to the public that it was designed to And practitioners claim it to have a high level of accuracy, although it's disputed. We felt it was incredibly important to get that point across to the contributors.
Right, so you can't tell us what the range is because you don't know what the range is.
Plus the viewer.
Yeah, so you don't know what the range is.
Well, we know it is disputed.
You don't know what the range is, do you, Mr. McLennan? Because otherwise you'd tell me.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were going into hospital to have an operation and the doctor said to you, this operation's not going to be 100% successful, would you just sit there, or would you say, well, what are the likelihoods of it being successful?
Well, I think what we did is we gave the information to the contributor, and they decided, like I said earlier, they applied they'd watched the show, they'd applied, and they gave informed consent to come on the show, and also they wanted to take a lie detector.
How can they give informed consent if you don't tell them what the accuracy of the test is? You can't just say it's not 100% accurate, because that could mean it's 1% accurate or 99% accurate. How can they give informed consent in those circumstances?
If we'd given a percentage, that could have been more dangerous, because I think if we'd spoke to different people, we would have got different percentages. So we felt it was very responsible to give this, which is that it's not 100%, because we wanted the people to be informed before they took a lie detector, before they went on the show.
So why is the premise of the entire show based on an exercise that is obviously flawed, that's inaccurate? I mean, it's the premise of the show is fake, isn't it?
No, I think one thing I'd like to say is that the show actually dealt with lots of different issues, and sometimes we'd do, shows about, inspirational children and different things. And yes, we used to use the lie detector. I think when you go onto kind of YouTube and you see the show, you'll see the most conflict moments of the show. People who watched the show, which was a huge amount of people. I think one year 55% of the country watched an episode of Joe and Carl. The people who watched the show, would see a different thing. They saw a show that was conflict, but was also resolution.
But they'll see lie
and always
detectors
striving
being
for
used.
resolution.
So can you answer my question?
But that's why
do you use
detectors.
something that is so flawed as a premise? Okay, maybe you might not agree with me that it's the central premise of the show, but it's a significant part of the show. Why do you use something that's so flawed? And why do you not tell people how flawed it is in specific terms?
Like I said, we use different tools. So the lie detector is one tool, to try to get to resolution. We use DNA testing. We'd also put people in rehab, in-house rehab units, to try to help them with drug and alcohol abuse. So there was a range of different things that we would use, and lie detector was one of them. But I think the most important thing was that, we felt that our duty of care was really important, and that we needed to make it very clear to the contributors and to the viewers that the tests weren't 100% accurate.
You have a very, very unusual view of the concept of duty of care, Mr. Clennan. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate there are other aspects of the show, but I think we all know if it wasn't for the lie detector test, we might not be sitting here today. Clive Efford.
Yeah, just very briefly, Chair. In the light of your answers regarding the accuracy of a lie detector, and the fact that you accept that there is a significant amount of disagreement about the accuracy, that clip we just saw, the way that the results were presented to that participant, do you still consider that to be appropriate?
I think, obviously, we did not pick that clip. But watching that clip now...
Well, you dispute that it exists. You don't... it's broadcast, yes? You accept that?
We watched just watching the clip there, I think Jeremy, did have a strong opinion about the lie detector, so that's why we also felt it was so important to make it very clear that it wasn't 100% accurate, and that's why we put it on screen as he was giving the results.
And so what did you take from him implying that he waved the card and that this is the reason why you wouldn't go on the stage? What was he indicating there, do you think?
Well, I think, like I said, Jeremy's got a very strong view, so he obviously believed in the result there, and he was saying that to the contributor, so that's why we needed to make it very clear. And
you said that you've been in association with programs that have used lie detectors over 15 years or so in a previous answer. Other than in reality TV shows, where have you used lie detectors?
Only within television.
So ITV wouldn't use lie detectors on their own employees, for instance?
I don't believe that has happened, and I think
they wouldn't think that appropriate.
Pardon, sorry?
You don't think that they would think that appropriate?
Well, I just.
But it's okay for reality TV.
I don't believe that has happened, but I think every single contributor on any show that has had a lie detector, is been fully informed and has also, agreed to take part.
Okay, Mr. Stanley, in an earlier answer, you used the term, and you did it twice actually, that if a participant disagrees with the result. Is that a pejorative term?
No, it will happen in terms of the result comes out and they say that they disagree with it. In terms of they fail the result, they fail, and they'll say, no, I was telling the truth.
But are you not indicating there that you believe in the accuracy of you accept the accuracy of the lie detector, and therefore people are disagreeing, but they're not right in disagreeing?
I accept that and this is definitely the language that I use with guests, that some people will fail that test yet be telling the truth. And I totally accept that I don't know the percentage of success or the percentage of failure. I'd rather work with guests in that way.
Okay.
Okay, leave it then.
I just wanted to, Mr. McLennan, something you said. I think you said Jeremy Kyle felt strongly about the test. Is that correct?
Yeah, to my understanding, he strongly believed in the test. Yes.
So he believes in the test themselves. Does he believe the test is an important part of the show?
Yeah, I obviously can't talk for Jeremy today, but my understanding is that he did believe in the test.
So, but I think it's just interesting because it's been suggested to us that Jeremy Carter's just a presenter of the programme and doesn't really have much of a say in the format of the programme. But I think, but clearly you believe that he thinks this is an important part of the format of the show.
I mean, it's one of the tools that we used, and I believe that Jeremy believed in the test.
Okay. Giles Watling.
Yes, I'd just like to... The overriding impression given by the show is that the lie detector is definitive. That's the impression that's given. I mean, otherwise you kind of wouldn't have a show. We're talking showbiz here. And it has been described, the show, the Jeremy Kyle show, as a sort of form of bear baiting. And one of the questions that comes to mind... Well, first of all, I'd like to ask you, has there ever been a case where somebody has failed the lie detector and has subsequently proved that the lie detector test was wrong? And if that has happened, has it been publicised, and have you, as newspapers do, printed a retraction?
I cannot recall a case right now of that happening, but I can look into that and write to you after this.
All right.
Because I don't, I want to make sure that I'm giving you the correct information.
It would be interesting to find out. But then that brings me on to the guests' understanding of what they're getting into.
Yes.
And it occurs to me, I have a career in show business. I understand how it works, and as an actor, I had a union behind me, equity, and I had an agent, and they had entertainment lawyers, so I had the backup. You're picking on members of the general public who don't have that sort of backup. They are not professionals in their arena. And you've got people whose, for many reasons, whose understanding of what they're getting into might not be as deep as perhaps mine might be. And you are then, to a certain extent, would it be fair to say, exploiting that, because you are then presenting them with someone who has the razor-sharp mind of a barrister and can tear them apart in public, which is part of the entertainment in the sort of Roman Colosseum-like way. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I wouldn't. I don't believe the people that came on the Jeremy Kyle show were exploited. I think, to talk about the process, I think, we did take our duty of care incredibly seriously. And I think that what we would do, is 99% of the people that applied to come on the show applied because they were watching the show on a daily basis. They had a problem and they wanted to come on the show. They would apply directly to the show. They loved Jeremy and they wanted to hear his advice. I know some people, will watch the show and see clips and think, we'll find that hard to believe. But the truth is that the people who were watching the show, watched on a daily basis and they wanted to come on the show and they wanted to hear Jeremy's advice.
It's an interesting thing It's an interesting thing you said there, was it that they have a problem. Are you not in some way exploiting the fact that they have a problem?
But I think just because somebody's got a problem doesn't mean that they're being exploited. You know, I think the fact that they want to come on this forum and, you know, talk about their problem, and the show was, yes, it was conflict, but it very much was resolution as well. We were always striving for resolution. And we did have proper systems in place that beforehand, you know, 90% of the people that applied on the Jeremy Carr show did not get on the show. And it was because we would go through lots of different checklists with them, and if any flags came up, we would pass them to the aftercare team, which really was more of a guest welfare team, and they would be spoken to. And if you know, if there was any point in the process that they you know, felt that they shouldn't be appeared on the show, the producers didn't override the aftercare team. They would absolutely be listened to. If Graham said that person cannot come on the show, then that person would not be on the show. And then the aftercare would carry on throughout. It's interesting, the clip that you showed earlier, I could actually notice there was 2 mental health nurses in that room, you know, while that was going on. And then afterwards, there would be aftercare afterwards, you know, and there would be, you know, counselling put in place, and we would keep in contact with them. So
the guests who come on your show are in a bad place to start with.
Well, no, they would have a problem.
They would have a problem.
We're going to talk a bit more about the aftercare and the guest selections. We might do that at that moment, if that's okay. Thank you. Ian Lucas.
Can I just clarify, first of all, the show is an ITV production, and you are the person in charge of the production. Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm, sorry if I didn't make that clear. So I'm Director of Entertainment North, so I am in charge of many different programmes across lots of different genres, including, you know, factual and current affairs and different things. And also we have daytime output, and I was one of the executive producers of the Jeremy Carr show.
So the researchers who are speaking to contributors to the show, are they employed by ITV?
The researchers?
Yeah.
Yes, so each team, so we would make normally 3, potentially sometimes even 4 shows in a day. We'd normally record on a Thursday and Friday. The team would normally have 3 days of casting, where they would go through all the telephone numbers and all the people that had contacted the show. They would then talk to them, and they'd also talk to, you know, the other side of the person that they had a problem with. If both sides agreed, they would then go to senior management, discuss the story with them, and then they'd start going through the checklists and getting the aftercare team involved when appropriate.
So how many of these researchers are there?
So there'd be 6 teams, and each team would have a producer, an associate producer, a senior researcher, and a junior researcher. And then we'd have teams around them for travel and everything else.
So does that mean 3 people in the team, or they have people as well?
So 4 people in each team, and each team would be making 1 show per week.
Okay, so how do you find contributors to the show?
So 99% of all contributors would call, so there'd be an advert within the show which saying if you have a problem, or if you would like a lie detector, you can contact the show. So 99% of people would contact the show. Occasionally there'd be maybe social media adverts or that kind of thing, but we didn't kind of street cast or anything like that. People would apply to us. And like I said, if somebody wasn't a regular viewer of the show, then that would be a huge flag for us.
So you placed social media adverts, for example, on Facebook?
I believe that, yeah, time to time that would happen, but normally it would be through the show.
So in one of the checklists, which is from the show, you ask a specific question. Did you get in touch with the show after you saw an advertisement on Facebook? So why did you ask that specific question?
I think if above that, the question above that is actually are you a regular viewer of the TV show? And then we come to that question, which is just so we're fully informed. So we're fully informed of where that person came from, because if they didn't come through the normal way, which is 99% of people through contacting through the show, we'd want to know the fact that it was through social media.
So why did you say Facebook? Why did you say on social media?
I think I'm not quite sure. I think it's because Facebook was.
Is it because you advertise on Facebook?
Well, no, I said that I think there has been adverts on Facebook, yeah.
But you specifically ask about Facebook specifically. So do you advertise on other social media platforms?
I'm not aware, but I would need to find that information out.
So do you know what sites you advertise on Facebook on?
On the...
When you go when you're advertising on Facebook,
Yeah.
how do you decide where the adverts are going?
Well, like I said, to my knowledge, 99% of the people are coming through the television show on a trail.
Aren't you targeting? Sure. You're targeting people on Facebook, aren't you?
Yeah, but I like I say,
is that yes?
Not many people come on the show through Facebook.
Well, why are you asking specifically about Facebook in your questionnaire?
Because I think if we would want to know if they didn't come through the normal route, which is an advert on the show.
Can I suggest that you're targeting individuals on Facebook? Isn't that the truth of the matter?
No, like I said, 99% of people who came on the show would apply through the show. We'd ask them if they were regular viewers, so we knew that they were informed with the presenting style and also the content of the show.
Were you trawling for contestants on Facebook?
Like I said, that I believe there were adverts that would go up on Facebook, but 99% of the guests would come through the show.
So did you have a shortage of? I mean, did you have a shortage of applicants to go? You said 90% of people don't get on the show. You said
yeah. We believe around 1,000 people would be would apply to be on the show a week, and then 90% of those would not appear on the show.
Okay. So why are you advertising on Facebook?
Well, because if that was happened, because obviously it's a show like any other daytime show that's trying to get a range of stories and topics.
So are you micro-targeting advertising?
I don't believe we were, because I think the advert that we were putting on...
Are you looking for people with particular issues and particular problems?
Well, we were looking for people who had a problem that they would want to resolve in that forum.
So you were going out there and looking for people with problems? You were advertising for people with problems?
I can only give you the same answer, which is 99% of the people who came on the show would be through the advert on the show.
Do you think that's responsible? To advertise for people with problems, to micro-target?
Well, we were advertising for people who had seen the show and would like to appear on the show.
Okay, can I ask you about Mr. Kyle's involvement in the show?
Yeah.
And what his role is. Is he involved in scripting meetings on the show?
Scripting meetings? No. So I could tell you Jeremy's involvement. So he would normally come up either the night before or the morning of record day. We would normally record on a Thursday and Friday. And then he would come to a briefing on the Thursday morning. We would go through all the notes of the guests that we had taken the night before. We'd go through a synopsis. Graham would be in the room. We'd talk about if there was any concerns. But that would be the first time he would hear the stories that would be on the show that day.
So would he only meet the participants on the day of the show?
Yes, he would, yes.
Does he have preliminary meetings with them to discuss their particular problem?
No, the producers would have those conversations, and the aftercare, actually, which is really important, actually, is would do a face-to-face of the morning and meet all the contributors before they went on the show. And even at that late stage, which did happen occasionally, if there was any concerns for a guest welfare, then then we would not go ahead with that participant or story.
So did Mr. Kyle himself meet with the individuals before the show?
No, he didn't, no.
Okay. In the notes that you send to participants in the show, you're talking about the notes that are collected from the participants. You say, with these notes, Jeremy is better equipped to advise and offer as much help as he can to resolve whatever problem or issue you may be facing. So does Jeremy offer advice and help to contributors?
So yeah, people would come on the show because they'd seen the show, and the show was conflict resolution. If it was a conflict resolution show, they were coming on, and Jeremy would strive to find resolution for that story. And then after that, Graham was quite often on the show because we tried to make a big point that this was something that was very important to us on the show. But even after the cameras, obviously, and the show had finished, then Graham and his team would step in and also try to put together any aftercare that we felt was important.
But the notes don't say that. You see, they don't say our team is better equipped to advise and offer as much help as he can. It says Jeremy is better equipped to advise and offer as much help as he can. Right. So when does he give advice and offer as much help as he can? At what point?
So
is that during the show?
Yeah, no. If viewers of the show, who watched, loyally every single day, will absolutely know that yes, there was conflict, but there was also resolution, and that was important. He would be striving for resolution.
Okay. So the viewers. Let me talk about the clip. You're on.
Yeah.
What offer and help did Jeremy offer in that case?
So he was.
What assistance and help did he offer?
So we obviously didn't see the end of the story, but he any viewer, anybody who watches it knows that Jeremy is always striving for resolution at the end of the story if it can be achieved. Sometimes it definitely couldn't be achieved, but he would always be trying to get resolution.
Right. Does he offer any advice and help after the show? Is he involved in talking to people after the show?
No, that would be more than Graham and his team, which is, not just Graham. He's got, there's 4 on your team, isn't there? 4 people, and they would be involved in that afterwards.
Right, so the only advice that he offers is during the show?
That's correct. Yes.
So, I don't think this statement's true. I think these notes, Jeremy's better equipped to advise and offer as much help as he can to resolve whatever problem or issue you may be facing.
I think the viewer who then has watched Jeremy for years and years and years, potentially thousands of episodes, they want to come on the show because they respected Jeremy, they loved Jeremy, and they wanted to hear what his thoughts.
I've no doubt
on their problem.
They probably
so I think that was trying to reflect that.
Okay, but I think they think Jeremy's, they have a positive impression of Jeremy. That's why they want to be on the show.
Yeah, of course.
But what the notes say to them that you provide is that he's going to offer help and guidance to them, whereas in fact what he's doing, he's putting them on the telly. He's not there to help them. He's there to entertain.
I think,
and with respect to Mr. Stanier, his job is to clear up the mess afterwards.
I don't see it as that. Of course we were.
I'm sure you don't. You've been making the programme, but that's the reality. I mean, I think this is really misleading what you send out to people.
I think to viewers of the programme it wouldn't be. I honestly believe that people who watch the show on a daily basis knew what Jeremy was. Yeah, of course, some of the clips, some of the things that we.
What is Jeremy? How do you describe Jeremy?
We'd see the kind of more conflict moments, but regular viewers would see that Jeremy, is a fantastic presenter. They wanted to come on the show. They wanted to talk to Jeremy. They wanted to hear his thoughts on their relationship problem or whatever the problem might be, and that's why they applied.
And if I may just add, just to echo Tom's point here about it was at its heart a conflict resolution show and a relationship show, and people did proactively apply in the hope of fixing some disputes, getting to the truth, seeking help. And I know firsthand, as the head of ITV Studios, how seriously duty of care was taken around informed consent, around being fit to participate, people being treated fairly. In this almost 15-year period, 20,000 people have appeared as guests on this show. 3,000 episodes have been made, and in that entire time, there have only been 5 Ofcom complaints upheld against the show, 3 of which were about language, none of which relate to the actual duty of care or the unfair treatment or the health and welfare of guests. In fact, of that 20,000 number, only 7 guests in the entire history have complained to Ofcom. And none of those complaints have been upheld. And I think that is a testament to the seriousness of the duty of care, the seriousness with which duty of care was
treated. Have you read these notes? Have you read these notes that I read out?
So you're addressing it to me?
Yes, I am. I'm addressing it to you, Mr. Bellamy.
Yes, I have read them.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I'm going to read them again. With these notes, Jeremy is better equipped to advise and offer as much help as he can to resolve whatever problem or issue you may be facing. Do you think that's a fair representation of what Jeremy does?
I think it's an absolutely fair representation of what happens in the show, and that the people who applied to be on the show...
It doesn't say the show, it says Jeremy.
Well,
and it says Jeremy because you're trying to encourage people to come on the show, because Jeremy's going to help them. Not the team, Jeremy. Use the word Jeremy.
People were very, very clear about the nature and content of the show.
Well, I don't think this is clear. I think this is misleading for vulnerable people who you've targeted. Do you know about the Magro targeting?
That does not capture, that is one document that does not capture the totality of the conversations that are had with the guests.
So you don't think it's accurate?
No, I'm saying you can't judge the programme on the basis of that one sentence. I'm saying that you have to look at the totality of it, and I would again argue that of 20,000 people that have appeared in this show, there's never been an Ofcom complaint upheld about unfair treatment of guests.
Do you know about the advertising on Facebook?
It's a relatively standard practice to advertise in that manner across social media for programmes.
Can you tell us where you targeted and what instructions you gave to Facebook about where they should place these adverts?
No, I can't, but I'm...
Can you come back to us and tell us?
Of course I can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Julie Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Bellamy, that sentence that Mr Lucas has read out, would you say that is a true sentence or a false sentence?
Sorry, which sentence are you referring to?
The sentence he's read out to you about Jeremy personally helping people solve problems. Is that a true statement or is it a false statement?
Well, I think if you watch the show...
Is it a true statement?
Yes, in the show it is a true statement.
You think that is a true statement?
Well, if you watch the show, it's self-evident.
I simply want an answer. You think that is a true statement or a false statement? Thank you. And can I just ask you about lie detector tests, going back to... Do you know what the percentage of accuracy is on lie detector tests? Because you were the big boss of this organisation. Do you know?
I know, echo what Tom said, which is that they weren't 100% accurate.
Do you know what the range is?
I don't.
Thank you. If we move on to some of the information that we've released at the start of the hearing today, which your company provided us with, there's a lot of information about whether there's assessments of whether any support may be required from our aftercare team. We've already heard in evidence this morning that the aftercare team is not really the right description of the team.
I think,
Can I ask the question? What I'm concerned about is what going on the show care is given to individuals.
Yeah, the aftercare party is about after the show, and the other, they're all the same members of the team. Guest welfare, the production team will refer people where there are concerns, and then there will be...
so is there any face-to-face sit-down meeting with
the
person? There is,
but not at that point.
At the point before they go on the show, is there any individual assessment of the person from anyone who is medically qualified?
They are specialist mental health nurse practitioners, and they will do face-to-face before show.
So if we move to this Jeremy Kyle Show checklist document that you provided us with, on page 6, it says read out, and it says we require the following medical information due to the nature and subject matter of the programme, and in order to ensure that we meet our duty of care to you as a potential participant in the programme, including providing suitable access to filming venues. That's fine. There's then a series of boxes. The series of boxes, the questions in the boxes, are they posed verbally or does the person read those?
Is this on the guest welfare continuous assessment?
This is on the document that I said it was called the Jeremy Kyle Show Checklist.
That's a production document.
Right, so who goes through that with the individuals?
So the researcher or associate producer or producer would go through this, and then as soon as there was any flags, then it would be
So
passed
nobody
over to
with
the,
any medical qualification would go through that?
It would be gone through by production, but then
So they don't,
if anything,
I presume they don't have medical qualifications?
I think my reading of that list is it looks like it's like a call list that a casting researcher would go through on the phone with someone. Is that correct?
yeah, that's why
Yeah.
there's scripting and everything to make sure that everyone's saying the same
So
thing.
where I've read
Yeah.
that bit out on page 6,
Sorry, we were struggling to find it.
page 6 of that
yeah.
document,
Okay, yeah.
halfway down it says read out, and
Yes.
I've just read it out. We require the following medical information.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a series of boxes below. The
Yeah.
boxes below, are they read out?
Yes.
So the one I'm particularly concerned about is, do you have dyslexia or difficulty reading and writing? That's read out to the individuals, is it?
It's read out, yes.
And the answers that come from that, if somebody says, no, I'm fine, or yes, I'm fine, is any further pursuant of that done with the individuals?
So ID paper. So that was mainly that the main flag for that would be because when we go through the consent forms and everything else, then we'd be made aware of that, so we could go through more fully with it.
So what I'm concerned about here is what assessment whether it's researchers or anybody else, giving to the people who have applied to be on the show and have got to this stage about their understanding, their level of language skills, their understanding of their literacy skills, their understanding of the comprehension of what, having read some of these documents, are quite complex legalese documents that I would suggest the average member of the public wouldn't necessarily have a huge comprehension of. Is there any assessment of that done at that point?
So I think it's all part of a longer process, because every single conversation we're having with them, is kind of building up to the informed consent. And obviously, you're absolutely right, with the dyslexia comment there. The reason for that is because then when we go through some of those forms, we know that we need to kind of go through them more verbally than maybe, written. But this obviously gives a snapshot. But, on the day, Graham and his team would also do a face-to-face assessment with every single person. And if there was about
literacy skills and language skills and comprehension skills, is that done at any point?
Well,
because somebody, if you look at all the evidence on people with not a level of literacy and language skills that their age would say they should have, somebody would, if you look at any evidence on this, if somebody can read and write their name, their address, where they're from, etc., they would say they could read and write.
Yeah.
But could they read and write to the level that could understand the documents that you expect them to sign to give informed consent, going back to the point that my colleague Joan Stevens was making? So what assessment of language and literacy skills and comprehension skills do you make?
This is something, I personally have quite bad dyslexia, so I understand the importance
I'm not actually, I'm putting dyslexia to one side.
Sorry,
I am specifically asking about language skills, literacy skills and comprehension skills. What assessment is your organisation at any level by anybody doing before someone is given the documents to sign that you are saying gives informed consent?
Well, like
what
I said,
are you doing
it would be, the conversations from the very first conversation till the moment that they appeared on the show would be lots of conversations, and obviously the checklist and forms would be gone through with them. If there was a worry that somebody wasn't understanding properly, then obviously this is something that would be discussed, but it's very case by case. But
so
I do see your concerns.
What would flag a concern to you?
If somebody, like I said, that was why it was very important to do a face-to-face before, because with the best will of the word, all the forms in the world, might not pick things up. Sometimes a face-to-face was the best thing, and that's why I was saying that even at that late stage, and we'd hope through all of our checklists and procedures, and actually, just to really make clear, the procedures, constantly evolved. This isn't just a procedures that we put in place 14 years ago and thought we'd done our job and let's carry on with them. I mean, on
so can I
sometimes
just draw
a
you
monthly
back
basis,
to this?
we'd move.
Can I draw you back to this
question?
question?
I just think it's quite important to.
If someone said
Yeah.
the language, if somebody answered yes to that, they're fine. Would any further questioning or assessment be made of somebody's language literacy and comprehension skills?
I think it would have happened throughout the process of
How?
conversations and on the one-to-one.
How?
But it's something that obviously did concern me, and it's something that we I feel we took very seriously. But I can
How?
see where your concern is.
But how? You're not answering my question. You're not telling me in any way, shape, or form where you're assessing these skills.
I'm trying to explain the process. So the process from the very first conversation, we'd be if any flags came up through the checklist, it would be passed on to the duty care team, the aftercare team, who would talk to them about a range of different issues.
But if somebody answered that question, do you have dyslexia, difficult reading and writing? If they said no, I'm fine, would any further assessment be done of that person? Straightforward question.
Well, potentially not, but there would still be conversations going forward that we would hope, would pick
And the
up
conversations would specifically ask about language literacy?
I'm not sure, I can't say it specifically would, but there would be conversations and a face-to-face with the team before they went on the show.
You keep physically gesturing to Mr. Stanier. Mr. Stanier, what would follow if somebody said they could?
I think
had no issue.
you've highlighted something there. I think that because it does not say refer, then you have highlighted there that, or identified that needs to happen. They need to refer to aftercare, who then can do an evaluation on that.
But if somebody answered that question, that they can read and write and they haven't got dyslexia, that wouldn't come to you, would it?
No.
So there would be no further conversations, would there, Mr. McLennan?
Well, I see. I would have hoped
Would
it
there,
would have been
Mr.
picked up
McLennan?
in the one-to-one, but I can see where you're coming from. So
Would there be any further conversations?
there wouldn't have been any official conversations, but there would have been a one-to-one
So there would be no, at any point, if somebody answered that question that satisfied you, there would be no further assessment of that person, that their understanding of quite complex contractual documents was at a level that really fulfilled your duty of care. That wouldn't happen, would it, Mr. McLennan?
There would be no more official
Thank you.
conversation.
Chair Stevens.
Chair. The checklist that Ms Elliott has referred to, obviously this is all self-disclosure,
Yes.
isn't it? So you ask the contributors to the programme, they give you information. It strikes me as a little bit odd when a lie detector test is a big part of the programme that you rely entirely on self-disclosure from contestants. Do you not think it's odd? The premise of the programme is whether or not people tell the truth, isn't it? So, and you're relying entirely on self-disclosure here.
Well, I mean, part of the process was obviously the checklist and the conversations and everything else. Part of the checklist was also talking to friends and family that were connected to the contributor, and in those questions we'd be trying to check to see if the information that they're giving to us is correct. So I could, it was self-disclosure, but we also talked to friends and family around them.
Right. So, for example, on other ITV programmes like Love Island, confirmation from a GP, for example, is asked for about a condition. Maybe there's self-disclosure about a condition. Why don't you do that?
So, I think Greg can probably talk more about that as the head of aftercare.
I think self-disclosure there's no reason for me anyway, to believe they're going to be dishonest. Self-disclosure is, yes, they have to be honest in their self-disclosures. And I know this is a sad reflection because some people don't have GPs and some people don't attend GP practice. And whilst on the one hand it may come across as that we're improving a service, that unfortunately is a reality.
Okay. So, of the contestants that appear on the show, do you know how many don't have GPs? Do you ever ask them if they've got a GP?
I work a lot in addiction, and a lot of the addicts that I speak to, that I send to rehab, it's very difficult. So In
So
a year,
so
I'd
you
probably, I'm just looking at that group. That group is probably the group that would inform me that they don't attend a GP practice.
So you don't know how many people haven't got a GP?
No.
because you don't
And we
ask
did
them,
have a
right?
GP that we could.
And
draw
we
on.
do have a GP, but it's not their GP.
Right.
We do have a medical practitioner
Yeah.
who we can contact and consult with.
Okay. So one of the other documents that you very kindly disclosed to us is what's called a special category data notice for the Jeremy Kyle show. So this is quite a lengthy and detailed document that people have to sign and agree to, which enables you to keep and use very specific categories of data which you'd otherwise not be allowed to use under data protection legislation. And that includes stuff about people's physical and mental health, their sex life, their race and ethnicity, stuff to do with the DNA testing and the lie detector testing. I'm particularly interested that in this very lengthy and complex document, it says right at the end that if you don't sign the document, if you don't give us your consent so that you can have this data, and I'll come back to what you use it for and how long you keep it, then depending on the information concerned, we may not be able to proceed or continue with your application or participation in the programme. So effectively, people have no choice, do they? If they want to come on the programme, they have to agree to holding this very, very sensitive data and then doing with it what is set out in this document. Otherwise, they can't go on the programme.
Yeah, obviously, recently with the new GDPR regulations coming in, this is something that we've had to take very seriously and go through everything.
Yeah, but
this
they
is all
can't.
relatively.
But you basically don't give them any choice, do you?
Well, this is obviously all relatively new, and obviously we have a team of business affairs and lawyers that are trying to make sure that we're compliant, and that's what they've informed us.
Okay, so it says also in this document that you will share internally with business affairs, as you mentioned, compliance and insurance teams. So I'm interested to know, why would you share information about people's medical data with insurance teams?
I'm not sure of the answer. I'm not a lawyer, but I can get that information and pass it to
Because
you.
what concerns me is that if this information is being shared with insurance teams, it would probably affect the contributor's ability to get insurance in the future.
Right, okay.
So
Let me look into
I'd appreciate
that.
if you could write to the committee about that. Thank you. How many contestants, in your experience, are put off going on the programme after applying and getting through this process and the self-disclosure form because of mental health issues? Is that something that happens very often?
I think it's a difficult thing, because obviously we put in very stiff duty of care because we wanted to make sure that everybody who appeared on the show was capable and okay to appear. But obviously we also had to be very careful that we weren't not letting people with mental health apply to be on the show, because obviously sometimes there is
So going back to my question,
yeah.
of the people that apply to be on the show,
Yeah.
how many do you reject for concerns about mental health at that first point, and then people who actually you accept and then you go through this process with them, how many then in your experience have been rejected because of mental health issues?
That's going to be very difficult to give.
Well, is it lots of people? Is it very few people? Has it ever happened?
I think referrals to the assessing team, probably 50-60%.
So 50 to 60% of people are then rejected and not
yes, at that point.
Fine, okay. And then finally, I just wanted to come back to something that you said, Mr. Bellamy, about complaints to Ofcom. You said that there are only 7 complaints made to Ofcom, I think.
By guests on the show, correct.
By guests on the show, yeah. How many guests on the show make complaints to you as ITV after the show?
I don't have that number to hand, but
right.
what
Do you keep a record of it?
I'd have to come back to you on that. What I would say is, if anyone raises an issue or a concern or a complaint that isn't satisfactorily resolved, they are referred to Ofcom.
So you tell them to go to Ofcom?
Correct.
Right, okay. So it would be very helpful for the committee to know, first of all, do you record complaints from guests, contributors to the programme, and how many complaints you get as a percentage of the guests that appear on the programme? If you could send us that. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan O'Hara.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Stanley, could I ask you, at the start of the session, we saw Jeremy Kyle thrust a card in front, in the face of a crying woman, and declare, "The lie detector says you're a liar." The director then cut to her husband, partner, whoever, who looked to be on the point of a breakdown. The director then cut back to Jeremy Kyle, who repeated the process, saying to this crying woman, "The lie detector says you're a liar." In your professional opinion, is this acceptable behaviour? Are you comfortable with what you saw?
It's not the behaviour I would employ. That's a really black and white statement, saying that somebody is a liar. In terms of the two contributors, there were two members of aftercare, and I think the example there was that there was someone sat with the female on the sofa, and they were there because they didn't want to be on the centre stage. So they were taken into that room, and then it was a very calm environment. And then as her partner comes in, there is another member of aftercare coming behind him.
Yeah, I saw all of that, and I'll come back to the people who were there in a moment. But I'm asking you, in your professional opinion, as the person employed to look after these very vulnerable people, are you comfortable with what you saw?
That is the presenter style, and I have...
Yeah, I know it's his style, and I'm aware of his style, but are you, as a professional, comfortable with what you saw?
I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for me and my behaviour. I can't be responsible for the presenter's behaviour.
What is your role then? If you're only responsible for yourself and you're not responsible for the presenter or the production,
I'm responsible for me, and I'm responsible for the guests, and the presenter. The responsibility for the presenter lies with production.
Right. Okay. I'm very unclear as to what your role is. Then I imagine that you would be an integral part of the production team, hired as a professional to say yes, no, you can do, no, you can't do. But that's clearly not your role.
No, that is my role. That is my role. But then, in the moment, I think he becomes passionate. I think he becomes opinionated, and he will deliver in that way. And if people are uncomfortable with that, then I think that's a production issue to address that.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that specific incident we saw. What did you do in the immediate aftermath of that incident?
There were two members of aftercare allocated to two people, so one per person, and then they would have been taken upstairs to their dressing rooms.
No, I'm asking you, did you go to Mr McLennan, did you go to Mr Kyle and say that was out of order, that was wrong, you humiliated these people, you exposed their vulnerabilities, you played on them, your style was overly aggressive?
My concern is for...
No, can I ask you, on that specific incident we saw, did you go to the head of production or the executive producer or Mr Kyle and say that was wrong?
My main concern on that part would be to make sure that both of those people had adequate support, and that I would have done. You've got to remember that senior members of production are watching that part, and if in their opinion their presenter behaved any way other than reasonable, it is for them to address that.
But you said it's not a binary choice. You didn't have to go and look after the guests at the choice of not speaking to Mr Kyle or Mr McLennan. You could easily have done both, and I would imagine that it would have been your remit to have done both. Did you do both?
I didn't speak to the presenter or the series producer on that occasion.
So were you professionally comfortable with what you saw?
I'm never professionally comfortable with black and white statements.
Okay. I'll come back to you in a moment, Mr Steiny, but on Mr McLennan, on that clip as well, you referred to it a moment ago and you said that in defence of what we saw, you said that there was two mental health nurses in shot. Now, I was under the opinion that mental health nurses were there to treat people with mental illness. Did these people were these people involved in need of mental health nurses?
No, sorry, a part of, I thought that was explained, it obviously wasn't very clear. Part of Graham's team, there are 2 special mental health nurses that are part of the...
It's a continuity of care. So the assessing team then goes through into the support team, and then the support team into the aftercare team.
Yes, but the 2 people you referred to in that clip, were they mental health nurses?
Yes, they were.
They were mental health nurses.
Yeah.
So, in your opinion, Mr. Stanley, were the subjects in need of mental health nurses?
No, they were needing, in that particular case, they were in need of a very calm environment after that event.
And just come back to Jeremy's style. I mean, Jeremy's, he's been on the show for 14 years. He was on the radio before then. He's always had the same style. This isn't a new style that's changed. He is hard and he's honest, but people absolutely loved him, and that's why they applied, and wanted to appear on the show.
Yeah, and that's why we have something called a duty of care.
We took our duty of care incredibly
we'll come to that. Mr. Stanley, what was your career path before you became Director of Aftercare on the Jeremy Kyle Show?
I spent many years as a registered general nurse in the NHS. Then when I left the NHS, I worked for many years in occupational health with an interest in mental health in the workplace. And then I took a period of time studying for 4 years, studying psychology and psychotherapy, and then received a master's degree.
And so do you have a professional qualification in psychology?
I've studied modules of psychology, but I have a professional qualification in psychotherapy, which is, often it happens that people will finish their first degree and then take a second degree and do postgraduate studies to study psychotherapy, which is more an intervention, a talking therapy.
So are you registered with the Health and Care Professionals Council?
I am registered with the UKCP.
But not with the Health and Care Professionals Council? Okay. Who on the production was the person that was that fully qualified psychologist who was qualified with and registered with the Health and Care Professionals Council?
Sorry, Graham was the head of our aftercare.
So there's nobody who has the professional qualification in psychology that's registered with the Healthcare Professional Council?
Great, like I said, Graham was the head of our aftercare, yeah. Okay.
Mr. Stanley, who acted as your professional second opinion when you were on the show, and what qualifications did your second opinion have?
Second opinion.
So, did you work in isolation? Or
no, I work in a team.
Yes, but you're the head of the team, so you're the head. So you look after people who apply to come onto the show.
Yes.
And then you look after them once they're on the show, and then you look after them when they've left the show.
Yes.
And so, first of all, is there not a conflict? Do you not see that there could possibly be a conflict there in what you do? And secondly, surely with that volume of people, with that amount of care required, I thought it would be standard practice for a medical professional to have a second opinion, or someone they have that second opinion.
We have four members of the team, and we work as a team, and we have supervision with each other within that team. We discuss things openly within that team, so we support each other. There's a team of 4, and we support each other. If I need any medical intervention, then I can contact the doctor. For instance, I might need a medical examination on someone that's going to rehab to check out their suitability medically.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. But so you never felt the need for any level of secondary support, or
I get secondary support from my team.
Okay, so you don't have a professional secondary opinion of someone who is a qualified psychologist who is registered with the Health and...
In terms of a second person to say someone is suitable?
Well, yes, I mean...
No, that system doesn't exist.
Okay, because I'm reading... I did read that Evidence from the Association of Clinical Psychologists is that only psychologists regulated by an independent statutory body, in this case the HCPC, should be carrying out assessments or directing decisions about psychological care for participants. Governance and accountability are absolutely key. Only a regulation can guarantee these. But that doesn't seem to be the case, and because there is nobody who is that HCPC qualified, is there?
No, we have a team who supervise each other and work as a team.
Okay, can I ask in Mr McLennan and Mr Bellamy, why is there nobody that a member of the Health and Care Professionals Council embedded with this team?
I think this is something we're going to have to come back to you on. We're going to have to look into and write to you.
I think the short answer is that we felt confident that the duty of care processes were robust.
Yeah.
And as you say, and the team relied on Graham and his aftercare team. So we were confident in the processes.
Are you still confident?
Yes, I am still confident in the processes. I think the duty of care, I know how seriously duty of care was taken. Whether it's about informed consent or treating people fairly or any aspect of health and welfare, I know how serious it was taken and how extensive and detailed the policies are. Saying that, look, of course, one of the things we always try and do, whether it's on this show or any show across ITV studios, is we're not perfect. I'm sure we could always improve. We're constantly striving to improve our duty of care processes, and we continue to do that.
Okay. So, Mr McLennan, why is there nobody on the team who has a professional qualification in psychology, and no one on the team who is registered with the Health and Care Professionals Council?
No, I think it's at the moment there's a review going across the whole of ITV, and this was happening before the car show finished, which is Dr. Litchfield is going through everything, but we have a risk management team that everything has gone through and checked. Like Julian said, we really did take our duty of care very seriously 14 years ago, and it is something that evolved over a period of time. We constantly putting in extra people. Went from a team of 1 to a team of 4. We added residential rehabs. We bought a doctor that we could use within the show as well. And it was something that we were constantly looking at and constantly updating and evolving.
And can I just say that the team itself are qualified and highly experienced, competent in carrying out assessments. They've been trained within the NHS to carry out mental health assessment. They've been trained in the NHS to carry out risk assessment. They've been trained within the NHS to carry out psychometric testing, and that's why they have the title of specialised registered mental health practitioners.
Okay, thank you. A couple of final questions, Mr Stanier. How many times did you stop someone going onto the stage immediately prior to filming?
Oh, I think I heard some statistics the other day. The assessment is ongoing, it's continuous from the moment we speak to them and to the moment they leave the stage, and then beyond that. At that point, it's a face-to-face assessment, maybe 50. 50
out of how many shows have been, did you say?
50 in the whole year.
Yeah, we've made over 3,000 shows.
Over 3,000 shows. Did you ever stop a recording of a show?
Sorry, somebody coughing.
Did you ever stop the recording of a show?
I have. When somebody has been distressed, and it wasn't a conflict part, but they were upset, they were reliving something, they were upset, recording was stopped and they were taken off the stage. If I felt it was necessary, certainly.
So you've interrupted recording. Did you ever interrupt a recording when Mr. Kyle was confronting one of the guests?
Okay, as a standard rule, every guest is told, as we walk down to theatre with them, every guest is told at any point, if you feel uncomfortable, just walk off the stage. I think that's probably why people see that so often. And then on the left and the right of the stage will be two aftercare members, but they're always informed. At any point you feel uncomfortable on stage.
But did you professionally ever intervene to stop a recording when you thought Mr. Kyle had overstepped the mark?
No, I prefer to work with the guests and say, if you feel uncomfortable, leave the stage.
Okay. How many times after the recording of a show did you say this show should not be broadcast?
Shall I tell you how that works? Well, I will speak to the guests after the show. If they have any concerns whatsoever...
No, I'm asking... what I'm trying to get at is your professional responsibility, not someone's desire to be on the television or someone's fear of upsetting the production team. Your professional responsibility. When, if ever, did you go to Mr. McLennan and say, this programme should not be broadcast in my professional opinion? How many times?
No, but because why would I say that? I'm trying to understand why.
Well, okay. For example, the clip that we saw of the people dreadfully upset by being called the lie detector claiming they're a liar. Was there never a point after the recording of a show that you went to Mr. McLennan and said, for the good of this couple or this individual's mental health, this programme should not be broadcast?
Yes, absolutely.
You have?
In conversation with
How
the
many
guests,
times?
In conversation with the guests, if they raise any issues of concern that have happened during their participation on the show, I don't raise it directly with Mr. McLennan, but I do raise it with the producer of that show.
Okay, so how many times have you made that intervention and how many times have they acted on it and not broadcast an episode?
They always act on it.
So how many times are we talking, have they, on your say-so, not broadcast?
Every time I make a recommendation, it's followed.
How many? How many episodes of Jeremy Kyle are sitting in a shelf, non-broadcast, because you said don't broadcast it?
I could potentially put a number on it. We could, at any one year, we would potentially over-record by 18 shows. So, we would drop parts if we felt it was necessary. And at any point, what I really want to make very clear is that if Graham ever said to us that he felt a part of a show should not go out, that part would be dropped, and he would have the final say, not the executive.
Could you find out, looking back in your records, how many times Mr. Stanley has come to the production team and said, for the mental well-being of the participants, this should not be broadcast? And could you write to us and tell us that exact number?
We can look into it. Yeah, it would be through the conversations he's had
there'll be a paper
with
trail.
The guests. Yeah,
there must be a paper trail.
There's paper trail on every single person who appears on the show. So we can definitely look into how many shows were dropped or parts were dropped through conversations with Graham.
Okay,
and I can try to get that to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just confirm on this point, Mr. Stanley? Is the case you can't recall at the moment a single occasion where you've made that recommendation that a story should not be broadcast? Because
I do make those recommendations after the show. If it's raised with me, which it would be with one of the aftercare members, I would then go into that room. I would have a long chat with them, and then if there were concerns, then I would say that I would then raise it with the producer, and then it becomes a production's responsibility to take it up to another level.
Okay, so you're saying you have done that. You have made recommendations to the production team that a particular story should not be broadcast.
Yeah.
And Mr. McLennan, do you know that you've acted on that advice?
100%. If I can say...
I know you're saying as a policy you would do, but I'm saying specifically...
Yes.
You believe you have not broadcast stories... Not
100%.
Because Mr. Stanley recommended
if Graham has said to me...
Yeah, no, I know that's it. I mean, did.
Yeah, no, I'm saying absolutely. Yeah. Graham has said to me a story should not be broadcast, and I have stopped it from being broadcast.
And because obviously the contestant, I suppose it is a contestant because it is an entertainment programme, the member of the public who's on the show has got no right to request that their footage... They've signed away all rights that they have when they take part in the show.
Plenty of examples, not even recently and further back, that we have stopped broadcasting certain stories for those reasons.
Paul Farrelly.
Thank you, Chair. My reaction when ITV announced, and I say ITV, I've got great respect for ITV and many of the people who work there and the job it does. But my reaction was, when this was cancelled, was good riddance, quite frankly. I've only come across this programme 2 or 3 times. It was when I was having my hair cut years ago in Clerkenwell, and the barber used to have it on incessantly. I couldn't change the channel, so I changed my hair cutter. And I just think it's a form of trash television. Predatory programming brought in from the US that people involved in making should be ashamed of themselves, actually. Ironically, as we sit here, it was 2 politicians, or former politicians, Jerry Springer and Rob Kilroy-Silk, who debased themselves in fueling the genre. So, not before time, as far as I'm concerned. Brendan's covered most of the additional questions I was going to ask of Mr. Stanier. But I must say, not having seen the programme, I was quite shocked by the clip that we saw, which was, despite the unreliability of lie detector tests, which is widely acknowledged, the presenter, in people's faces, was saying, this test says you're a liar. They take that as a liar, and yet you, Mr. McLennan, rather like a salesman of a dodgy product, were pointing to the small print that was on the screen but not available to the contestant or guest to justify that behaviour. How would you view that comparison?
Well, I completely disagree. I think as I said earlier, it's about informed consent for me, and we could not have been more clear with the guests that applied to come on the show. Not only had they been viewers of the show, so they absolutely knew the content, but we would make it very clear to them about the accuracy of the lie detector before they travelled to Manchester, where we filmed, before they took the lie detector and before they appeared on the show. And then on top of that, we made it very clear to the viewer. I'll repeat, the lie detector is designed to indicate whether somebody is being deceptive. Practitioners claim it to have a high level of accuracy, although this is disputed. So it was very important to us that everybody was informed, from the contributor to the viewer.
That's clearly, as people have pointed out, not reflected in the behaviour of the presenter on a programme of which you're the executive producer. I've been on this committee for 14 years now. We've had some characters in front of us. And I must say your attempts at justification put you in a sad category of your own, as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Stanier, you're registered with the, I just looked them up, I'm not familiar with them, the UK Council for Psychotherapy.
Yes.
That's correct. I don't know the organisation, but from your, with your description of your role as a medical profession, to use a broad category, it's sort of rather analogous to somebody from the medical profession watching a dangerous driver using a behaviour like that and saying it's not his role to ask the driver to slow down or take the foot off the accelerator, but your job is really to put people on a stretcher afterwards. It's a strange view of a professional's duty.
No, I do believe that people have choice, and they make a choice to go on the show. It's about making sure that they're fully informed, and that's just not by production. It is part of the process that we do that as well. And then it's a continuous assessment, and throughout that assessment, we're constantly saying to them, we're Girls Welfare, we're here to support you, we are the team that you need to support you. We will do that all the way down to the studios, take them to the studios, and then inform them that at any point that you feel uncomfortable, then please leave the stage. We're going to be here waiting for you. We're just working with the guests constantly. And I'll just go back to the point that I believe that the presenter, his style, his language, is something that is part of the production team and not part of guest welfare. Of course, his language, when you on here, that black and white language, you know, you're a liar, it's not something I would use. It's not the language I would use.
But going back to Mr. Hara's points, I mean, you seem to be a professional voyeur of car crashes and see your job just to put the bones back together afterwards.
I think you have to look at it. Do you want a guest welfare programme on the Jeremy Kyle Show or not? Somebody has to do that job. I'm quite happy to do that job. I like looking after people. I like treating people in terms of, I like the aftercare program that I've created for them, sending people off to mediation, sending people off to rehab, sending off people off for relationship counselling, for counselling. You know, I've been afforded a great budget to help people. So yeah, it's not just the bit that's on the stage, it's what happens in aftercare. I've been afforded opportunities to help an enormous amount of people.
I could just add that...
And to be paid a lot of money out of that great budget, no doubt.
Can I just add that this year alone we've put 13 people through rehab. They've been in there 3 months at a time. We've spent 122 hours of paid counselling, of mediation and anger management, and approximately 95 per year referred to free services. So, you know, I know when you see clips on YouTube or clips at the hairdressers in isolation, you know, it probably doesn't feel like it, but the reason we really wanted to come here today was to make it very clear that we know the show was controversial, but we did take our duty of care very seriously, beginning, middle and end.
I'm going to, just as a matter of curiosity, how big is the budget that you're given?
Sorry?
How big's the budget you're given?
The budget?
Yeah.
It was. I was never ever aware of a budget, but whatever.
Just that it was big.
So when he said budget, I've never ever said to Graham at any point that he couldn't do something because of money. Okay. We've just always.
I make a request and then it goes through.
I just want to. Clearly, the limitations of your role, pretty much self-imposed, quite frankly, have been quite evident through the answer. But could I just finish with asking one question? What's the best advice to give a patient who comes home and is distraught that they've tested positive for HIV medically?
What is the best advice?
Yeah, what can be some of the best advice to give someone who's distraught who's tested positive for HIV? Well, it's often to go back and have another test because of the false positives. So when people failed lie detector tests, did you ever advise the programme that perhaps they were so distraught that they might just take them again?
No, I didn't advise.
You didn't?
That.
Ever?
No.
Okay, enough said.
Thank you. Julian Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Stanley, you said earlier about how you were saying to participants that should they become particularly distressed or under pressure, they just walk off the stage. That's correct, isn't it? Is that what you said earlier on?
After the show?
In the show. You told Mr. O'Hara, I believe, that you often said before they went on air that if you find it too much...
Yes, please just walk off.
Okay. Mr. McLennan, when they walk off stage, they're still in camera, aren't they?
Yes.
So they're sat there. You, Mr. Stanley, you say that these people are then met by aftercare specialists. Is that right? These people have a clipboard and a earpiece. The earpiece is sent to the gallery, is it not, Mr. McLennan?
So it's actually slightly different. So on the Jeremy Carr show, so you're absolutely right, a talkback position would normally be in the gallery.
Right.
In this instance with Jeremy Carr show, we
the point is, Mr. McLennan, you're in touch with them. That's correct, is it not?
Yeah, but we were on the floor.
So that's fine. That's good. Okay, so you're in touch with them. So these people, especially you're saying to them, Mr. Stanley, basically, you're really distressed. We just walk off. It's okay. Then they're put with a member of your production team, and then effectively they become part of their entertainment once again. They're still in camera. They're still basically, you're instructing your individual effectively keep them within camera. You'll be basically asking them to place them within camera and keep them within camera. So what you're effectively doing is a moment of distress that you have said to them, a way out. You, Mr. McLennan, are then effectively creating an environment for them to the future, for further exploit that stress at the sides. That's correct, isn't it?
I don't agree with the word exploit. I think.
Well, the part of the entertainment, there's no privacy, there's no space. This is not a get out. This is basically, effectively, a means by which to create greater tension, greater drama on the show. They go off stage, and then you further effectively exploit them. Part of the entertainment, their distress, they've signalled to you a stop, effectively. They've said to you, I need to get off, because Mr. Stanley has advised them of that. But instead of actually effectively allowing them off the stage, allowing them peace and privacy to regather their thoughts, you, Mr. McLennan, effectively constructed a production that then effectively allows them to be exploited further, to remain part of the entertainment when Mr. Stanier has told them that effectively by doing this, they are not part of the entertainment.
I don't agree with the word exploit. Like I said, I think everybody was completely fully informed of the show. They'd viewed it for many years.
So they're cognizant of TV production standards,
and
then
then
the TV station
I was
works.
trying to explain earlier the talkback position. The reason why that was on the floor was because then at any point a producer or an aftercare person like Graham could come over and talk to the person in talkback. We could take the show to break, or there was lots of things that we could do.
One of the views I've ever had of it, and I've looked on YouTube, etc., basically it's a moment of drama. They storm off the stage, they're stopped by a person with a clipboard and a microphone in their ear, they're kept in camera, and then effectively they then stay there, and they maybe your production person talks to them, etc. But all the while, their distress, when they think they're in a safer space, when they're achieving a safer space, their distress is there for people's entertainment.
Well, like I say, I think it comes back to form. They would have watched the show. That is something that would happen on the show. So, it comes back to informed consent for me. But what we're talking about is the beginning, middle, and after of aftercare. And actually, what we're talking about is even in those moments where tensions were high, there was members of Graham's team with them.
Okay. But they're on camera, so maybe the main members of Mr. Stanley's team may be there, but they're still on camera. They're still on camera.
During it, and
they're still part of it. They thought they're out. They thought they're out, Mr. McLennan, but they're still on camera. That's a fact, isn't it? So let's have a look at let's have a think back to the original clip we saw. We saw an extremely distressed woman who effectively, potentially her life is being ruined by cod science with all the veracity, in fact, of a toss of a coin, and in that respect, at that very moment, how certain are you? Because I was struck by something, the vulnerability of the woman, the fact that many of your participants are couples. How certain are you, and what checks are made to ensure that female participants in a relationship, or actually anyone in a relationship, is not being coerced to go onto your programme? There is not effectively. Do you, for example, interview them separately?
So so through the process, so obviously we'd talk to the individuals separately on the phone. We'd take lots of notes from them, so we knew exactly what they wanted to say. One of the reasons for that is that we wanted to absolutely make sure that they got out everything they wanted to say on the programme, because actually it was quite a short period of time, sometimes only 10-15 minutes. So we'd have those conversations with them the night before. On the day of, we would separate them. And we would go back through them with the notes, and we would make sure that they completely understood everything that they've told us, and make sure that they were, basically pre-interviewed before they went on to the show, so they were fully informed.
Isn't there a danger here that you are effectively facilitating a form of emotional violence? Sorry, Mr. Stafford.
I could answer that question. That once we do a face-to-face and they're in individual rooms, you will ask that question about whether they've been coerced or they've been put under any pressure to do the show.
So you just say you've been under pressure. Do you sort of, in any way, embellish that in any way? Do you sort of ask a particular situation? Because presumably it's one person has contacted you.
It is. You will go. So once they arrive at the studios, they're then allocated individual rooms, and then you will always do a face-to-face check with them that morning before they go to their studio. And it's really important that we do, because they're now often the evaluations are probably being overheard by somebody, maybe if it's a telephone conversation. But you do have to make sure that they feel safe and that they haven't been put under pressure or coerced to come to the show. So you really want to know that it's something they want to do.
And what about the interplay between different relationships? My concerns are effectively that there may be very vulnerable women, effectively, who are presented with a suspicion by their partner that they have been unfaithful, etc., as we saw in that clip. Yeah. And effectively, what then happens is that suspicion then is then aired in public, and that this is deeply emotionally damaging, reputationally, but also is part potentially of a more abusive relationship.
I agree. I totally agree.
And so, what safeguards you had that is not part of a more abusive relationship, that you aren't effectively at the tail end a part of a process of abuse?
I'm totally aware of those concerns, and it is part of that process that we do talk to people separately when they're on their own, because you really do want to establish that they haven't been put under pressure or coerced to do a test in order to prove fidelity, and that you want to exclude at all costs that there has been physical altercations in that relationship or violence in that relationship. And another additional check that we will carry out is what we call source checking. So as part of the whole process, we will speak to 2 people who have been nominated by the guest, and then we will speak to these 2 people and make that line of inquiry whether they are aware of any issues within that relationship. Have there been any violence within that relationship? So again, we're trying to check on those issues.
What
constantly.
do you do when you discover there has been violence in the relationship?
It would be gone. It would be over.
What?
It wouldn't happen.
But is that where your duty of care ends, effectively?
No, absolutely not. So if you speak to somebody and they're declined to come on the show, it absolutely doesn't end there at all. It could be any situation. Some people are not engaging with NHS services. You would encourage them to do that. People who are obviously in relationships and it's been disclosed that there may be a victim of domestic violence, then of course we need to reassure them that there are agencies out there that can help and support them. Yeah, absolutely. When we decline somebody and say that it's not possible for you to participate for whatever reason, it's not an end point for us. We do have to put them in whatever service they would find helpful.
When you say put them in whatever service, what does that actually entail?
In terms of, so if you identified when somebody was on the phone that they had depression, then you would recommend that they went to see their GP and have the GP evaluate them.
Sounds the sort of advice you get off someone on a bus, frankly.
This
sounds like the sort of advice you get from someone on a bus rather than a trained medical practitioner. So what is it actually you actually do? If you discover that someone trying to come onto your show, or you discover afterwards that someone has been a victim of domestic violence, what do you actually do apart from say just go and see your GP?
No. And if I was talking about depression, and when if it's a victim of domestic violence, I'm definitely going to send them to, or advise them, or one of the team is going to advise them to seek help from domestic violence units. It is important. You don't just leave it. I mean, you've identified that there is violence in that relationship, then you need to progress that forward.
Okay. Now, there's been participants who've been in touch with the Select Committee, and they've told us their impression was that there simply wasn't any aftercare. Why do you think they've said that? Mr McLennan?
It's very difficult for me to answer. I think, the main reason I want to come today was to make sure that we expressed to you that we had a proper duty of care. There was guest welfare was very important to us, and that extended from before, during, and after the show.
That's not what your participants said, though. They said effectively that they don't feel there's any aftercare.
See, I don't know who you're talking about, so it's very difficult for me to comment.
Right.
But that simply wouldn't be the case.
Mr. Bowman,
if I may, it's very hard to answer in fairness in the abstract. And look, any time we're made aware of any concerns, it is something that we look into, and certainly happy to look into any other concerns that you may have, or any of the participants' concerns. I would just echo again that I know how seriously duty of care is taken, and I would also just echo again my point about Ofcom and the amount of...
Yeah, I know that you've fallen back the few times. I mean, we've obviously concentrated, Mr McLennan, Mr Stanley, during this hearing. In the few times that you have spoken, you've fallen back on Ofcom. Frankly, most people don't know about Ofcom, haven't any idea about it whatsoever. So I really don't think it's particularly I know it's one thing that you may wish to fall back on, but I don't really think that here today, I don't think that's a particularly sort of robust defence of your programme. The fact that people who may actually, frankly, have many serious issues don't know where Ofcom is or don't go and complain to Ofcom. So, I mean, that's great, but I don't really think that's a particular thing. But if I was to say to you that you just said how you're very happy, in fact, you've said before how you're reassured by the duty care, the aftercare that's happened. If I say to you the letter to participants states the following: if necessary, counselling sessions will be arranged, but that, of course, it is completely up to you whether you want to take up this help. To what proportion are participants actually offered counselling, and also what criteria decisions are they, is counselling based, and who do participants call? I mean, this doesn't sound like a sort of open invitation. This sounds like, if necessary, of course, it's completely up to you whether or not you want to take up any of this help. It just sounds to me as if, frankly, it's there. It's almost like giving someone a leaflet. Off you go. Doesn't seem to me, frankly, that this is anywhere near robust enough for ITV Studios to have his name associated with.
I don't think that's right. I mean, I again know firsthand from seeing Graham and the team at work that they have a very robust set of duty of care procedures. Graham can talk probably more directly to the point you raise than me.
I think it's about why that was like that, because obviously today we're talking about the conflict resolution parts, but quite often we would do reunion parts. And obviously if somebody was being reunited with their long lost father who they hadn't seen for 20 years, they were very happy and they potentially might not need counselling. So it couldn't be a one fit for all. It had to be case by case.
So you're comfortable leaving it entirely up to participants whether or not they're offered to take up counselling?
It would be for Graham and his team to have that conversation with participants. That's why they would always be seen before they left the studio.
Isn't this too hands off? Hasn't the whole thing been too hands off for many years? I mean, the culture you've been as a program about 14 years, isn't it? Cultures do grow up. Do you recognise now that potentially the aftercare has been too hands-off?
I think, like I said at the beginning, this is something that we took seriously 14 years ago, but it is absolutely something that's evolved, through time, and we were still looking at. It was still evolving. So it isn't just a process that had got old and not fit for service. It was something that we were constantly refreshing and looking at.
How have you refreshed it recently?
Like I said earlier, the in-house rehabs that we now give 13 people this year. This is only something we bought in the last few years. We've taken the team up from 2 to 3
last few years.
4.
How many years?
I couldn't give. I'm trying to think now. Probably 3 or 4 years.
3 or 4 years. So basically 1/4 of the time that Jeremy Cowell has been on air. You've had 3,000
the checklists
guests.
and everything we were refreshing. We were looking at the moment, seeing if we could be improved. Like I said, we have. We were going through all processes once again, even before the axing of the show. I just think that's a really important point, that it isn't something that we'd have taken our eye off, because that isn't the case.
Final question, Mr. Stanier. Were referrals ever made to GPs or mental health services after sessions?
Referral to GPs or mental health services?
Yeah.
We would probably, if and when required. So often, yes, we would certainly recommend for people to go and see GP services if we had
referrals. So is that what you term a referral? Just say a recommendation, effectively. Is that what you'd say?
It would depend. If you had concerns regarding someone's mood level, you would refer them to. You would discuss that with them. These people may not even go on the show. They may have just chaperoned somebody. We may have had a chat with them prior to the show. There may be people that have been declined, but they wanted to come to the show because they had friends coming to the show. If they had been declined because of low mood, then it's what we do. We will refer them to GP service. We will express our concerns that they've got low mood, and then go to your GP, have your GP carry out an evaluation of your mood. So we're trying to engage people with services.
Okay, well, you're full of buzzwords, but I don't really see any particular practicality sort of end point at that. You seem to be saying like, okay, well, off you go. Almost like off you go. There you are. You should be going to see a doctor. What does actually result in? I mean, you talked about the idea of a rehab before, but in terms of mental health and GP services, do you not take any more further part than that? You've put these people on air. And then effectively you're taking...
Oh, these were people prior to air, sorry. After, we will see people. It's about problem, it's about solution. And I suppose my focus is always on what's the problem that you bring, and then at the end of the show we can do a needs assessment. What's the solution I can provide for you?
Thank you. Thank you. Clive Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Just go back to the checklist. So someone indicates that they want to go on the show, and there's an initial telephone conversation. And that's followed up with somebody of the production team ringing up, going through this checklist. Does everyone who indicates that they would like to go on the show get this follow-up call with this checklist?
Yes.
So
everyone who was going to appear on the show would go through this checklist.
Yes,
and
but
then
does everyone who contacts the show, following that initial conversation, get called back to go through this contact list,
Does
this checklist?
it would?
So is everyone taken through this checklist who indicates they want to go on the show?
I think.
So is there some sort of sift that goes on in the first phone call?
I think actually, since GDPR came in, I think this is something that we had to have certain scripting for. So actually, we'd have this conversation. We'd read this out to pretty much everybody who appeared on the show.
So there's no form of vetting process in the initial contact whatsoever. This is it. This is where
this is what they call the chasing.
Okay. So when we go through this, if you
I think this has just been updated. It was going to be updated.
So can I just ask you very briefly about the question on page 3, which is about education?
Yes.
What type of school was it? What level of education reached that? But at the end in the box, it's got for official use only. Google the school.
Yeah.
What are we looking for there?
So, I think that. Sorry, I just want to make sure that I think that we would only come to this bit, and we would only kind of get to that level of detail if this was seriously being considered to be on the show.
Right.
We would maybe start filling it out, but then we'd only get to that detail if it was going to be appearing on the show.
But this is the questions that are being asked by the member of the production team on the telephone. Yeah. So presumably they go through all these questions, do they? Or there's a...
Well, they go through these questions. I think they'd speak to some of the script. They'd hear what some of the story was like. We'd obviously speak to them and find out kind of the reason why they wanted to come on the show. We would then speak to the other person and find out why they wanted, if they would want to come on the show as well, and then we'd start getting through the checklist. So it would be quite early. It would be quite early stages that we'd go through the checklist. We'd probably get the understanding of both people wanted to appear on the show before we got to the checklist. To be completely clear.
Right. So there'd be quite a bit of sort of to and froing between individuals before anyone is gone through this checklist.
Yeah,
so there is some sort of sift before the checklist then.
Well, there'd be a conversation. Yeah.
Or Zun's conversations.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So what are we looking for when we look for someone's school?
So I think that would be for lots of different reasons. As somebody said earlier, this is why we talk to people who are related to the story. For one, to see if they're telling us the truth. If people are lying about their history or anything, then that would obviously be red flags. I think it's also, if we looked up the school and it would be a school for potentially special needs, then that would be red flags to us.
I mean, we're not looking at targeting people from different types of schools.
No. If
from
something came up that it was
very welcome on your programme.
No, if it came up and it was a school of special needs, then obviously that would be a red flag and something we'd want to look into more. But that wouldn't be an exclusion; it would be something that we'd want to look into more. Okay, and there's also a question on here about where you indicate to someone that they should check people's social media history. What are you looking for there? So that is, again, to verify the story. It's very important to us as the show was a tabloid show, and it was important for us to make sure that everybody who came on the show, was telling us the truth. Very occasionally, people would try to come on the show and make up a story. So one good thing about social media is if we went back, normally you could see if what they were telling us was the truth.
And are we looking for people with problems when we look on social media?
Well, they would have already called us with a problem, so the problem was pre-existing, and then we would go back and verify that.
Okay, so when we go through this checklist, there's quite a few references to where if the answer is yes on violence, on drugs, on various aspects, psychology, counselling, social worker. Any disorders like eating disorders, OCD, etc.
Yeah.
And against all these ones, it says refer to the aftercare team.
Yeah.
Now, if this is prior to going on being selected to participate in the show, is referring to the aftercare team code for this person should go on the show?
No. I think we made that very clear that this is the number one reason why we wanted to be so open with you and talk about it. I know that people, when they see the show, they would sometimes think it was controversial and everything else, but the duty of care was incredibly important to us, and I can't stress that enough. And we put these procedures in place. And why so many people did not end up on the show, because we couldn't have taken this more seriously. So
there's not a disproportionate number of people who are referred to the aftercare team at this level, at this stage of the checklist, who appear on the show.
I mean, Graham might disagree. I mean, I'd say, over the years, because the systems and procedures, were tightened and got stronger and stronger, there probably wasn't many people or many stories, at some point did not, get referred to aftercare, and then every single person had a face-to-face, before they, before the recording started.
Yeah, what I'm really just trying to get at is there a disproportionate number of people who, at this stage, going through this checklist, that are referred to aftercare that end up going on the show?
Well, it's case by case. So this the whole thing is set up for case by case. So depending on the reason, is why it would then go to aftercare for them to assess if that person should then appear on the show. But it really was case by case.
Right. So if we go through this checklist and no one, if somebody, an individual or a couple of individuals are not referred to aftercare, yes. You still consider them go on.
So if they didn't get referred to aftercare, and they got through the whole checklist without any flags whatsoever, then they would be free to travel to come to the show, but they would still have a face-to-face when they got to studio.
Because given some of the issues that are listed here, autism, schizophrenia, ADHD, refer to aftercare.
Yeah.
It's quite concerning that once you've identified those needs, that you might still consider this person for the sort of program we saw at the start of this question session.
You have to consider then the level of participation. It might be a desire for them to be part of a show, but if there are certain disclosures, and then once you've carried out the assessment, there are that you clearly need to reduce the level of participation, then that's what we would recommend to production. So, for instance, you can reduce level of participation to the point of giving a statement, maybe a video statement, sitting in a room quietly and having a private interview with the presenter. So you can effectively reduce their level of participation.
And again, at that point, I'd like to say that, if Graham said to us, okay, that person cannot appear on the show, but, what we would be happy for them to provide a statement, then that person wouldn't appear on the show to be recorded, but they, as long as they agreed, they would then, give us a statement.
So Mr. Stanley, just my really last question. In your professional capacity, I mean, you've seen comments from mine that are, saying that the programme should prioritise people's needs over the desire to make the programme. I mean, are you comfortable with being involved in this programme?
I would definitely reduce people's level of participation in most cases to providing a statement only.
Thank you. Charles.
Yes, I'd like to come to the area of content, what we used to call footage in the old days. There's a wonderful quotation here from the Social Inequalities Research Centre at Lancaster University, which says, "The power of editing is unbelievable. A sentence constructed of two sentences said 20 minutes apart sounds and looks like it was one sentence." Now, you record the programmes and you therefore do go through some form of editing. Do the contributors have any idea or understanding of the power of editing?
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting with the Jeremy Carr show. So it was actually a normal ITV hour would be 45 minutes. The Jeremy Carr show was actually 50 minutes. We almost recorded as live. So we for a 50-minute show, quite often we would record, 53, 54, 55 minutes. And then we would take those minutes out. But other shows, other daytime shows, you could obviously, as you'd be fully aware, you could record hours and hours and take it down to that amount. So to only lose 3 or 4 minutes Really what you saw on the show was what happened on the day, and the reason that we take those minutes down is just because we had to get it to a certain amount of time for television, and plus if there was certain things that wasn't appropriate for a morning slot like swearing or anything else, then we'd be able to take those out.
Would you say that you can sometimes, as we know, editing is a very powerful tool,
Very much so, yeah, I know.
And you can make somebody who's telling the truth look like a liar, and somebody who's a liar look like they're as innocent as an angel. But do you ever use that? Do you ever use camera angles, anything like that, to point up a certain angle that you, from the production team, might like to make?
No, like I said, it was recorded as almost live with just a few minutes taken out. We weren't changing particularly camera angles in the edit or anything else. So what people watched at home was what people were watching in the studio.
Okay, I accept that. So are the contributors fully aware of how the programme will use the content? How do you inform them?
Yeah.
How do you tell them?
So we would go through, as part of the informed consent and through all the conversations we had, people were aware that the show would obviously be used on in the morning, obviously, but the show would be repeated as well. If there was a long period of time after the first transmission, we would then call them back up and ask them if they minded it being repeated again. If the show was used within best of episodes, we would call them up and ask if they minded their participation being put in that as well.
And do they regularly deny you that permission?
Some would, because their lives had moved on. The problem that they came on the show potentially a year or 2 years later had moved on, and they wouldn't want to be included, let's say, in a best of show, and we would honour that. So plus, if they contacted us and asked, had a good reason for us to not carry on repeating the programme, obviously it would be case by case, but we would look at that too.
Okay, so fundamentally they are aware that this content that is shot is there forever, potentially, and you could use it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the contracts and everything said that, and what we were kind of discussing earlier, but actually in the kind of real world, it was far much more fluid than that.
Okay. As part of the contract, the guests receive a special category data notice, which is about ethnicity, health, business affairs, health and safety, compliance, aftercare. First of all, do the contributors understand what that means? I mean, I'm maybe not the brightest man, but when I read these contracts, I find them heavy going. Is it made clear to your contributors exactly what this wording means and what it will mean in the future?
I mean, it's kind of, this question came up slightly earlier, and it's a difficult one to answer. Obviously, we had to put that information in, particularly with the rules changing. That was not put in by production. It was lawyers and business affairs. We tried to explain over a period of time instead of just the contract, but we would go through the contract with the contributors as well.
Did you sit down in a room with them and take them through?
Yeah, we would go through the contract with them. In hindsight, I've gone through the forms in the last few days. I wonder if there is some lessons to be learnt, and potentially we could soften some of the language going forward.
Okay, that's good to hear. How long do you keep the data?
So that's changed again recently. So I would need to find, obviously, as you're aware, with GDPR, everything is changed. Everything's changed in the last few months. So I can't give you an exact at the moment, but I can supply that to you.
That would be very good. Thank you very much. And finally, do you think that contestants or contributors should have greater power over their content? Do you just take it and
as
then
in the
it's yours?
editing, or?
Well, I mean, is it possible, or is it something that you would consider doing to allow a contributor to see what goes on in the editing suite? Would you allow them to see an edited, finished programme?
I think that would be very difficult in the real world. I can see why you're asking it, but I think you're almost offering editorial control to the contributor, and I'm not sure how that would work in a real world setting.
Do you feel that they might say, well, this programme can't go out? Do you think that might be one of the...
I just think it would be very, very difficult, and I'm not sure if it would technically be possible.
But surely the resources could be put there, Mr. Bellamy, could
I don't think it's a question of resources. For me, it's Look, there's certainly a question of some practicalities, but I think more fundamentally, actually, I think the system works well in terms of informed consent, making sure that people are then fairly and accurately represented in the show. I would worry about ensuring that producers, must always have editorial control to tell a story in a fair and accurate way as they see it.
But there is the issue that quite simply, one does an interview, then looks at it back afterwards and thinks, my gosh, it shouldn't go out like that, this is dreadful. And you'd like to be able to have some sort of power over how it goes out. And as you're dealing with people quite often, in a very delicate stage in their life, do you not think that they should have some more control over what you actually finally broadcast?
Not if they are fully and properly informed about what they're participating in. And then we are, remember, we are obviously operating in a very tightly regulated industry, certainly in comparison to newspapers and the internet and so on. So I frankly don't personally see the need, though I do think as well there are some practical issues with that as well.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Jo Stevens.
I just have one question. Mr McLennan, you just said about how you sit the contributors down to take them through the contract and you go through it with them. At any point do you advise them to go and get free, fair and impartial legal advice on what you are requiring them to sign?
No, we haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Brendan O'Hara.
One final question, just something I picked up in the language you were using about sort of going forward, and sort of coupled to the rumours that this could be making a comeback. Do you have any plans whatsoever to bring this show back in any format with Mr. Kyle as presenter?
There is no. So, just being very direct with you, there are absolutely no plans, and we will not be bringing back a show that looks or feels like the Jeremy Kyle show.
But you don't rule out working with Mr. Kyle in the future?
Well, the network have been, and ITV has been very open and transparent about that. Jeremy Kyle has been involved in all sorts of programmes, from Good Morning Britain to the Kyle Files, and so yes, we would be looking to work with him in the future.
But nothing that remotely resembles what we do as the Jeremy Kyle show.
We won't be making another conflict resolution show.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that concludes the questions we have for you today. We appreciate your time, and we'll move on to the second panel. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
For joining us today. We appreciate your time, and apologise for the lengthy run of the first panels. We're starting slightly later than we had planned. We do have one or two members of the committee who are rejoining us, but I think we'll make a start now in the interests of time. If I could ask Karen McCall, Peter Bazalgette, you head up ITV, you're responsible for ITV. Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by some of the things you heard this morning? I imagine should ask, did you have the chance to watch the first witness panel?
We had a chance to watch some of it, not all of it. We've been waiting outside for a little while. So I don't think I'm surprised by the responses necessarily. I think that they tried very hard to outline to you what the processes were, what the duty of care was, how they dealt with contributors, applicants and then contributors, and they talked quite a lot, I think, about the procedures of the show. So I think that is what it is. That's the show.
But would you? I suppose the question for us is: do you feel that those standards were adequate?
I think we did an internal review, as you know. So when we suspended the show on the 12th of May, actually, and announced it on the 13th, we initiated an internal review. Now, that review was really about the episode, the one episode, which we actually then cancelled the show subsequently after that. But the internal review hadn't started, and that was really about the processes that were being used on the show and were they being applied on the show. That's what the internal review was about. And the conclusion of that review was that it was that the processes existed, they were detailed processes, and they were followed.
But, for example, do you think it is adequate that the production arm of the programme don't know how accurate the lie detector tests are?
So that was one area that I think what they were conveying is that they made it very, very clear that lie detector tests are not 100% accurate, as you heard repeatedly. The two examiners that we use, and I completely concur what they said, the two examiners we use, if you look on their websites, they say that the lie detector test, in their view, has an accuracy in the 90s. We have chosen never to put that on the show because of the range. The range is always disputed. So whether you look at the professor on the programme or whether you look at our own examiners that we used, it's an independent company, there is quite a range of anything from 60% that you mentioned to 95%, as they've mentioned, and they've put that. It's a matter of public record because they have that on their website. So I think what the production team were trying to convey is that they didn't use the range, they didn't use those statistics because they were in dispute, that there was a complete understanding that lie detector tests are not 100% accurate. They tried very, very hard, I believe, to tell every contributor that. I think you heard Graham Stanier's view of how he would deal with that in very normal language, i.e. rather than using statistics, he would talk about the fact that you could be telling the truth, but the lie detector test will say you are lying. That was talking to people on a one-to-one basis to explain. They also used to go through with participants the worst consequences of a lie detector test. They would actually talk to participants about how they would feel, what they would think if the lie detector test went against them. So from that point of view, I think what the team were trying to convey is they didn't want to put a statistic on it because the statistic would be wrong because it is so disputed. So their way of dealing with that was to say it is not 100% accurate and then to deal with that face-to-face with individual participants to explain that.
But I think the reason we asked so many questions of it, I've looked on the website of the company that provides it. What they say on the website is exactly what the production team say to the people, which is it's not 100%. I didn't see a figure in the 90s. It just says it's not 100%. And as we talked about earlier, I think that statistic is meaningless because 50% is not 100%, 40% is not 100%. And my question and my concern here is I can't see how someone can give informed consent to take part in a lie detector test when they've got no idea of how accurate it is or even what the range of accuracy is for that test.
So I think Chris can come in here as Director of Compliance. Both of those examiners would say that their accuracy was in the 90s. We never chose to reflect that exact figure because we know that that would be disputed by somebody else. So I genuinely think that it is possibly disingenuous to say to people, either that this was going to be accurate in the 90s or 70% or 80%, because none of us know. There are many different opinions. What I can say to you is that they went through processes to try and explain the lie detector test and why it wasn't 100% accurate. And indeed, we've now cancelled the show, as you know, and I will say that we will not commission a show in the future in this way, in this format, using lie detection tests, for the very reason you've just highlighted, which is the ranges. It depends on who you talk to.
But I find your answer slightly puzzling, actually, because on one hand you're saying they've done nothing wrong, but on the other hand you're saying we're never going to do that again.
Well, I'm saying that they haven't done anything wrong because they have explained that lie detector tests are not 100% accurate. You may have a strong view that should not be used. You may have a view that they should be not be used in formats.
And also, the strong view I have is that we're dealing with actually really vulnerable people. In a setting they're not used to, being told that this process is accurate. It's been presented in the programme as accurate. Jeremy Kyle gives no ambiguity in the way he presents the results. No one's ever given the chance to have a retest. That was not offered to them. They don't have the right to stop the broadcast of the footage or the test if they're uncomfortable with the result. They have no rights to do that at all. And I'm not sure in that environment, and the test is not even done particularly in a controlled environment. It's just done in a room at Media City by people that don't particularly have any medical qualifications.
If I can assist at all with that, the test is done in a hotel room adjacent to the studios.
So the Holiday Inn at Media City, is that where it's done?
I think you might actually be right. I think
okay,
it actually might
is that
well
a
have been
controlled medical environment?
It's a quiet place to conduct the test.
And done on the morning of the show. So someone's doing a lie detector test, probably feeling, it's not something they've probably done before, might feel a bit under pressure. They've had a night away in somewhere that's not their home. They are, they're taken to a room to do this test. They'll get the results shortly. It'll be on television. Probably not been on television before. That's probably quite a nerve-wracking experience. You think that's the best environment to take a lie detector test?
It was generally done either the day before or on the morning. Yeah, that's true. All I would say is that the actual polygraph examiners themselves would take each guest through quite a detailed explanation of the test. So an explanation of just how it worked in terms of the physiological changes that it was looking to capture, and how they then ascertained the result, whether or not somebody was being truthful or deceptive.
But the thing is with these tests, and I've not had anything today that convinces me otherwise. That most doctors or nurses who take blood pressure readings would say you don't base it on one reading, you base it on several, because some person who may not see a doctor regularly might feel a bit nervous about it, might give a high reading, and another day it's fine. I would imagine someone taking a lie detector test is in the same position. And what this machine is not reading whether you're telling the truth or not using special powers. It's reading your heart rate, it's reading your perspiration levels. And I think someone in a pressurised environment, it may not give an accurate reading. And the readings that were given, about 60% accuracy and so on, were actually based on it being done in a controlled medical environment, not being done in a hotel room at the Holiday Inn in Media City, the day you go on telly. And I think this is so important because a lot of the premise of the show wrestles, the reason we are in this room is because of the lie detector test. And that's why I think it's so important.
And so what I would simply say to that is they did work hard to explain the lie detector test to anybody that would go on the show. They did use two examiners. There was not always only one test. Sometimes both examiners would do a lie detector test on the same person. And actually, everyone who appeared on the show did watch the show and did understand that in many, many episodes of the Jeremy Kyle show, as you rightly say, the lie detector test was used.
But I don't think what they were told about the lie detector test fairly reflects the nature of the test and the accuracy of it. And I think it's interesting that no one had the right to have a retest. No one has the right to stop the results of the test being broadcast.
I think if someone asked for, I think Tom did say this, which is if someone asked for something not to be broadcast, we would take that on a case-by-case basis.
Only on medical advice.
Yes.
Not just, if someone wasn't showing, just like, that would be on medical grounds, and we still don't know how many times that happened. They couldn't answer that question, but we'll be interested.
They're going to come back to you on that.
We'd be interested in that answer,
yeah.
But only on medical grounds, not on someone. If someone said, look, I feel this test is a lie, or I know it's a lie, I don't feel I really knew about the accuracy of the test before I did it, I'm not happy with it, I don't want that going on air, the answer will be sorry. You signed away your rights, and you've got no right to have a retest either. And I'm not sure that is a position to put vulnerable people in.
I understand the point you're making, Chair. All I would say is I think most people who applied to take part in the show and specifically asked for a lie detector, believe they wanted it because they wanted an answer to an uncertainty in their relationship or in some family dispute.
Actually, just on the purpose of the show, which I know has been a matter of some discussion in the previous panel, the intention with the lie detector from the producers of the show was for people to be honest with each other, so that it generated honesty and an outcome. And the aim of the show was to have some kind of positive outcome, some kind of reconciliation. Now, that didn't always happen. It did happen in many cases.
But I think one of the reasons why people were asked about their knowledge of the show and Jeremy Kyle Starr, because Jeremy Kyle Starr had a big impact. I think some of the members of the first panel even called it the conflict part of the show, where Jeremy Kyle is being deliberately confrontational, he's engaging people in conflict. And I thought what was very interesting as well was when we were told that though people were advised if they were uncomfortable they could walk off the set, the filming carried on. They weren't stopping filming, they were just being filmed in a corridor rather than on the set itself.
Yes, well, I mean, whether you like the show or not, and I think many people liked the show, that was the format of the show, and I think the audience understood that, and actually the participants were often in the audience and did understand the format of the show.
I suppose I think our concern is even if people watch the show, they may not really have understood what they were getting themselves into until they were in it. And was this responsible, and was this show an accident waiting to happen?
And Chair, one of the first questions you asked was about informed consent. And I do think it is relevant that people were asked whether they'd seen the show. Everybody's seen the show. The show was very well known. They knew what was involved. They knew the direct style of the presenter. They knew how he deployed the results of the lie detector tests. And they'd seen the effect on the people taking part, and they'd seen sometimes it resolved conflicts, sometimes it didn't. They knew all that. So I think that does contribute to informed consent.
Karen McCall, you said when there was an email you sent to ITV staff that was published by BuzzFeed, I think the day after you sent it, which was, and you sent this email at a time when the show had been suspended, not yet cancelled. There was only, I think, about a 24-hour or so period between those two decisions being made.
48.
But in that, you say that the decision to suspend the show was, and I quote, "not in any way a reflection on the show, but the best way we think we can protect the show and the production team from the reaction we expect to this death."
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
So that was an internal email, and it was directed at the production staff, closely involved with the Jeremy Kyle show and the wider production staff. And I would say that everybody at ITV was extremely sorry to have heard that someone who had appeared on the show had died in quite close proximity to appearing on the show. So what I was saying to them is, suspending the show created shockwaves in the production team. It had never happened before. It was unprecedented. And I was trying to say to them, we are going to go through this calmly and in a measured way. We are doing an internal investigation, but that is the way. Doing an investigation internally is the way to protect you all as individuals. That's what I meant by that.
So did you not think it was a bit, it slightly preempted the internal review to say that the decision to suspend was not in any way a reflection on the show?
I think what I was saying is that we couldn't say that. What the internal investigation was doing was we were looking at one episode of the show. We weren't looking at the whole Jeremy Kyle show over 14 and a half years. And that's what I meant by that, because you can't say to a production team that it's a reflection of everything you do every day and that you've been doing for 14 years. So it was an internal email sent to specific individuals who are working at the sharp end on production. I mean, they were harassed by the media. I mean, many of them were phoned, doorstepped, talked to. It has been a very difficult time for people who worked on that show.
So the decision to cancel the show,
yes,
that was taken about 24 hours or so after this email was sent.
48 hours.
48
yes.
hours, okay. Was that a reflection on the show?
I think a number of factors on that episode made it untenable for the show to continue.
So it was a reflection on the show. The decision to cancel is a reflection on the show.
It was certainly a reflection on that episode, yes.
But on the show, but I'd have to say, given that you're saying that you're not going to bring the format back
No.
And not going to have programs with lie detector testing anymore.
I said we won't use it in that way, in that format. No,
okay.
We won't commission a show with that.
Well, you have to say that's a reflection on the show, isn't it?
In
totality.
For me, it's about, we've taken a decisive action. We've been very decisive about it. There were a number of factors involved, which was specific to the episode. It included actually some letters which have appeared in the media, the report of which had appeared in the media, the proximity obviously being very serious to the show, and we believe that was the right decision. And that's what we've done. And we have done an internal review, and as I said, the processes have been followed, but we will learn from this and we will improve everything we do as a result of learning.
But I think, given what you said, I think the decision to cancel the show and not bring back that type of show again, with Jeremy Carr presenting it, could only be seen as a reflection on the character of the show. If it was just about one episode, then you could learn the lessons from what went wrong in that one episode, or maybe look at the team producing the show and say maybe we need some different people making this happen. But you wouldn't just cancel the whole thing unless your concern was there was a problem with the show and that problem wasn't going to go away.
As I said, it was not about the show in general. We took a decision based on one episode of the show. That's what we looked at, and that's why we cancelled the show. And it was a number of factors that gave us we believe it was the right decision, because we looked at what we had. Things became clearer over 48 hours, and there was no black and white there. I mean, it was a very difficult decision to cancel a show mid-production, but we believe it was the right decision.
Does ITV intend to work with Jeremy Carr on any future programmes?
So Jeremy Carr does work for ITV and has worked for ITV on other programmes, and what we've said is that we will continue to work with Jeremy Carr, but not in this format, not as a talk show, and we haven't confirmed what that would be.
So not as a kind of well, you should not going to do a conflict resolution
Not a talk show, not a short talk show of this ilk in any way.
Okay, Clive.
I just really just to clarify, because I'm in sort of disbelief that this entire show was cancelled just because of one episode. So, I mean, for instance, let's go back to the issue of lie detectors. Was the efficacy of lie detectors ever discussed at executive level? Did you ever really consider, whether it was appropriate to continue to use such a defective testing system?
So as part of our risk assessment of all our shows, we would obviously assess the shows on what was being used in the show. But I could say the lie detector test specifically was not discussed at executive level.
And I mean, were you aware of any concerns being raised about lie detector tests? Was that ever brought to your attention, that the impact that these tests were having on people, and suspicions about the accuracy of them, the proven inaccuracy of them? Was that was never ever raised with you?
So no, that wasn't raised. I think the thing about lie detection tests, as we've discussed, is everybody, I think, knew that they were not 100% accurate, and the range of accuracy is debatable. So we all knew that, and we believed that we covered that because of the process before, at screening, and face-to-face conversations with participants, and indeed at the front of the show we make it very clear, and actually when the lie detector test is being used we make it very clear that it's not 100% accurate. So we haven't actually had many participants complaining about the use of lie detector. We haven't had volumes of participants doing that, because if they did, actually many of them would have written to Ofcom, and they didn't, about the lie detector test. So no, I think, just worth bearing in mind, a lot of people on this show had issues. Some may have been vulnerable, but many of them had real life issues about relationships or problems with alcohol, whatever it might have been. And many of them wanted to do the lie detector test. And so what we had to make sure we did was go through our duty of care for that. So no, not volumes of complaints about that specific issue, which is why it wouldn't have come up at executive level.
So you satisfied yourselves, because I mean, at the end of the day, the decision to go ahead with this show, when it was being made, is your decision. So you satisfied yourselves that even though these people wanted to take the lie detector test, that they were sufficiently warned about the inaccuracy of those lie detector tests that you were happy with to be continued to be used in those programs?
Well, I think as we've all said, that we do believe the production team, the medical staff, Graham Stanier himself, all worked very hard to explain what informed consent meant and explained what the lie detector test would entail and the fact that it wasn't accurate. I do believe the production team worked hard to do that.
Thank you. Ms. McCall, you said earlier that the two companies that you use, the lie detector test companies, had advertised that the accuracy of their tests was about 95%.
I said in the 90s.
In the 90s. When did you become aware of that? Because you've just said to my colleague that you never discussed the lie detector tests at your level.
So
in your
Chris,
company.
as Director of Clients, has been aware of that for some time.
So when were you aware of it?
I was aware of that a few weeks ago.
A few weeks ago,
yeah.
Right. And you were aware of it, Mr. Wisson, from when?
Well, I mean, the show has been running for 14 years. The particular examiners that the show has used essentially is the same team of examiners that have been used for most of that time. And so I was aware, I can't tell you at what point I became aware, but I was aware that the examiners themselves would say that the tests were accurate into the 90s. And those examiners, I should say, are qualified and trained. They have American qualifications, and certainly in the USA, lie detectors are more widely used than they are in the UK, it's fair to say.
And so you've used the same company, you said, through the 14-year history of the programme. Were you aware at any point during that period of evidence from other companies and academics that, you know, the accuracy of lie detector tests is not as good as 95%?
No, what I was aware of was that there is a genuine debate about the level of accuracy. And obviously some people in the industry would say it's 95 and some might say it's less.
And did you ever, as a risk mitigation issue, think about going back and looking into that more, or asking the companies that you use to verify their claim of 95%?
I don't recall that ever being discussed. No.
Right, okay. And earlier in your evidence, you mentioned that the practitioners who administer the test to the member of the public, they did it in that hotel room in the Holiday Inn, I think it was. Did they tell the contributors, the members of the public, as they're administering the test, that it was 95% accurate?
No. No,
they definitely didn't. You know for a fact that they didn't tell contestants that it was 95% accurate.
No, I'm sure they did not.
But do you know that?
Well, obviously, I was not present. I was not present for every time, the thousands of times that a lie detector was administered. So no, I can't say that.
So they've told you.
They have told me that they were always very clear with every guest that they made clear to the guest that it was not 100% accurate. It's fair to say that they would represent that it had a high level of accuracy, but that it was not. In other words, that it was not foolproof. That it was not 100%.
But the producers of the show, if I may just add to that, the producers were very clear that they didn't use the figure of in the 90s, as you saw from the previous panel, because they would have mentioned it if they had. They used the figure. It is not 100% accurate, and that was what the show did.
Yeah. And when those tests were actually carried out in that hotel room, was there a member of ITV staff present in the room when those tests took place?
No, they
So you don't know what those people said to the contestants in those hotel rooms on any occasion, do you?
The tests were recorded, so it would be possible to ascertain exactly what was said.
Okay.
And the reason it was recorded was actually primarily so that if a guest later was to query the way that the test had been administered, or, for example, to say that, well, that's not right, I wasn't asked that question, it would be possible to have a record to reassure them that actually that was...
And did that ever happen?
I don't recall it ever did, no. I'm not aware that it ever did.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
But that was recorded by the company themselves, if you like, for their own protection, if you like, because they didn't want anyone to later say, oh, well, it didn't go that way.
Okay, so I'm clear. So you were aware of the 95% claim, but you cannot say whether or not the practitioners who carry out the test made that claim to the members of the public who took the test in any of the tests that were carried out over that 14-year period.
I think the examiners would always have been very careful to make it clear that it was not 100%.
But you don't
accurate.
know that, do you? You can't say that as a fact.
I've not reviewed thousands of tests that were undertaken.
Okay, thank you.
So just one quick supplementary on that, on the what
Yeah,
Joe
I have
was
others want to come on this too, but just one.
just one what Joe was just asking. So given that you had that information about them, was legal advice about how to deal with the use of lie detector tests? For instance, the terminology used on the disclaimer that was on the screen, was that ever discussed by the executives? I mean, because ultimately you're responsible, aren't you?
I believe that was discussed by the production team. It was, I mean, like everything else that goes into the show, it's an editorial decision what we say on the screen.
If I might say, we need to make sure that we're talking about the right processes in ITV. So the production executive would have definitely discussed the use of various tools and techniques in the show. The management board or the PLC board would not have done that unless there was an alert. And there was not an alert for all the reasons we've mentioned. The use of lie detection tests are within the broadcasting code. We have not broken any regulations. There were no complaints to Ofcom about lie detection tests. And the participants, we believe we went through processes that ensured we had informed consent. So if any of those things were not in place, that's when it would have come up to the executive board. But the production executive would have discussed what was going on in the show. It's a daily show. It was going out every day for 5 days a week. Production executive would have definitely discussed it.
Brendan.
Thank you, Chair. I think we can be honest here that for all the nuance and all the spin that you want to put on this, and for all the references to the small print, in fact, the lie detector was presented as truth on the show, on the day, to the people involved and to the viewing public. It was presented as truth. And you had a presenter who was an active participant. He was a belligerent in this. And therefore, anything that you say now is trying to remodel what the facts of the case were. And as I say, you can hide behind the small print and the nuance of it, but that's the fact. Don't you agree?
Mr. Hara, we would not spin anything, ever. We're trying to be extremely open and transparent with you and as helpful as we can be. I think that we genuinely believe that we made it clear to participants and indeed on the TV screen, in the forms that were signed, that people understood that this test was not 100% accurate. We did what is required. We probably went beyond what is required to ensure that the participants of the show, and indeed the viewers of the show, knew that this was not. For Jeremy Kyle, he believed, I think, more in this, but he also knew they weren't 100% accurate. And you're right to say that on occasion he would say, this test says you are lying. He would use that, but that was his style. And everybody who watched the show and people who went on the show knew what his style was. It was very direct, and it would frequently do that. Now, you might not like that style. It makes people feel uncomfortable, no question. But we would not spin something like this.
So you honestly think that at all times, that both to your viewers and to your contributors, participants, that they were given absolute, they knew and understood the absolute truth that this lie detector, the results of which were, as we saw in our clip, going to be thrust in their face and said, you're lying. They knew.
I honestly think that the team did whatever they could to explain that. There will be some individuals that would not listen, I think, probably. That's just human nature. But I think the production team would have done everything they could to ensure people understood what they were getting into on that show. Partly because they had watched the show as a viewer, partly because they knew Jeremy Kyle's style. In fact, many of them wanted to be on the Jeremy Kyle show for that precise reason. So I think they will have done what they could to ensure people understood that the lie detector test was not 100% accurate.
So do you think then that the show in itself, was it a public service, care-orientated show, or was a ratings-driven sensationalist show. Which was it?
So I think you can have both, in actual fact. I think this show had been going on for a long time. We are a commercial public service broadcaster. As you know, we do a huge range of programmes.
This show.
But this show, I would say, at its core, was trying very much to resolve people's issues. That's why they looked for people with issues, and therefore that was what the show was about. It did have some positive intentions. It didn't always work out like that. That is clear.
So from day one, its driving force was conflict resolution and to bring people together, not to sensationally split people up or to lay people their most innermost feelings and fears in front of an audience of 1.5 million people.
I didn't work at ITV 14 years ago, but when I have looked back on the purpose of the show, from its inception, it was a radio show first, became a TV show. From its inception, it was about trying to resolve issues for people with normal lives in the real world. That is what it starts
Can I
off.
just have one?
Sure.
Mr. O'Hara, I mean, you may not have taken evidence or been given evidence from them, but there are a large number of people over that period of time who did find the show helpful, who did find that it resolved their conflicts or helped them with personal problems like addiction. That is on the record. There are a large number of people who did get benefit from it.
Okay, can I ask you all just one final question at the moment? Up until it was cancelled in May 2019, were you as an ITV board proud of the Jeremy Kyle show, and did it reflect the values that you wanted ITV to reflect?
Well, perhaps I could answer that. When I look at the number of people who viewed it and enjoyed it, when I look at the number of people who wanted to get on the show because they thought it had some value, and when I look at the number of people, as I've just mentioned, who got some benefit from it, it was something to be proud of, yes.
Wow, okay.
Look, I'm proud of what ITV does. I think ITV is does a whole. I'm very proud of ITV.
You are right to be so, but I'm asking specifically about.
Do you know what I would say is that it may not be to your taste, the Jeremy Kyle show, or anybody around this table, but it was watched by 1 million people a day. We did not make a commercial decision around this show, right? The decision to stop the show we didn't even discuss commercial things. But I think that what the purpose of the show had a good intention.
Yeah, so you're answering lots of questions that I didn't ask.
Yes.
So let me ask once more. Did the Jeremy Kyle show, before it was cancelled, reflect the values of ITV?
It reflected the values of wanting to help people, of wanting to have people on a show that were from the public, where they genuinely wanted to seek help, whether it was counselling, therapy, rehabilitation, family mediation, child mediation. It did all of those things, and it did help a lot of people. And I know it's not a popular thing to say here, but cancelling the show is not as straightforward. I mean, I have emails every day. There's a 50,000 petition asking for the show to be coming back. We're not going to bring back the Jeremy Kyle show, but it does show that there are a lot of people out there. The emails say, this show helped me with my issues because they brought them into the light. So I'm just reflecting a different perspective to you, where other people saw value in this show.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Julie Elliott.
Thank you. I just want to follow up a few things that you said. Mr Wisson, you said that these lie detector tests were recorded. Did the contestants who were going through that process know they were being recorded?
Yes.
Now, we've heard from the chair already that actually, being under stress, being recorded, these are people who aren't used to being recorded in any situation. It's not like us sitting around here where cameras are on us 24 hours a day if we're in this place. Surely that in itself will negate some of the results of a lie detector test.
Well, I don't claim to be an expert or a polygraph examiner myself, but the polygraph examiner would explain to them that it was natural to be nervous and that would not influence the outcome, and that the test itself had, if you like, test controls built into it to take account of that. And so what they would do would be to ask a series of, if you like, control questions before they got to the particular questions which had been agreed with the guest. So perhaps I'm not explaining well. I think what they would be told was that there was no need to worry about nervousness, because that ultimately would be taken into account when the examiners assessed the physiological reactions which they were recording.
It sounds just unbelievable to me. It really doesn't stack up at all on any level, that at all. But
Miss Ali, could I just say one other thing about the experience of being recorded? I think it's fair to say that in the era of the smartphone, actually everybody is used to being videoed. In some cases, virtually all the time, some people record their lives. So I think the just on that particular point you made about being recorded
that's
and
not
videoed.
what your documentation says. It talks about people being nervous, being nervy when they're going to be filmed. So your documentation
that's a reference to the whole programme, the experience of going on the programme. You were just talking about the experience of taking the lie detector test and being videoed, and I just wanted to add that point.
Okay, well, I don't agree with you, but there we are. I also want to come back to something you said, Colin, about the work that your team worked very hard to explain the lie detector test. Mm-hmm. Now, we've sat here with your team for more than 2 hours, I think. I don't feel they've explained to us at all satisfactorily the merits of the lie detector test, the way it works, or even that they actually knew totally how it did work, or the parameters around it. You've come in quoting percentages, seem to know far more about it than they did, and yet you've also said that it's their job to know that, and they didn't. So I find the statement quite alarming when you've said they did work hard to explain the lie detector test, because if they can't come in here where they knew they were going to be getting asked quite, searching questions on the whole issue, because it's a very serious issue, and they certainly haven't satisfied me. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I would be very surprised if they have on the answers to those questions. I find it quite alarming as you, as the head of the organisation, can say that they work very hard to explain to contestants or participants or whatever you want to call people to explain the lie detector test.
I'm sorry you feel that. I feel that they might have also been a little bit nervous.